That's why we have to think as black people. Stop singing and dancing and start thinking.
Wow.
Thinking and reading. I say reading is more important than watching TV.
All right, it's time now for some cultural insights with Brittany Luce, the host of NPR's It's Been a Minute. The podcast unpacks some of the biggest cultural happenings bubbling up right now and why these trends matter. So, hi, Brittany.
Hi, Elsa. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my God. Thanks for being with us. What trend are you bringing us today?
Well, today we're going to talk about something that's actually trending down. And I'm talking about reading.
Reading, as in reading books.
You got it.
It's going down. See, I totally suspected this.
Yes, no, you were absolutely right. According to a Gallup survey from 2022, Americans are reading fewer books per year than ever before. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Time Use Survey, the time people spend reading has dropped steadily over the past 20 years, too.
I feel like this is tracking my own life. But anyway, keep going.
No, I feel you. And the thing is, people are noticing this and talking about it. I'm going to guess you read that popular article from The Atlantic a few months back about how college kids are struggling to read longer texts.
Oh, my God, yes. And I remember this one professor was saying that some of his students had trouble even concentrating on a sonnet.
Yes. A very short poem. They were struggling with that. But people who aren't in college or don't have to read in the same way are thinking about this too. There's this super viral post from January by ex-user Emma Weaver, and it set off a big online discussion about reading when she said this, quote, "I miss having a sharper brain. I don't know how to fix it. My attention span sucks. It's hard for me to read books. My memory is horrible, and it's hard to retain information."
I mean, yes, I get it. For me, it's like a patience and time thing. Like a book has to be really, really good now for me to want to sit with it for that long. Because, I mean, honestly, there is so much other content in this world. So now books are competing against all of that content.
Oh, same. I love to read, but I feel like I've had to really work to be able to enjoy books like I used to. And I don't think it's unrelated that Oxford's 2024 word of the year was brain rot. I think a lot of us are feeling like our brains are rotting.
I mean, my brain is probably rotting too. So what did you find out about what is causing this overall decline in reading books?
Okay, well, first I talked to Elaine Castillo. She's the author of the book How to Read Now. And she said she's actually got a problem with how we talk about this decline as an individual issue.
Massive corporations have essentially captured the capacities in us for reading.
She's talking about social media companies here.
Our attention, our capacity for critical thinking, imaginative thinking, all of which are things that are baked into our code, into our evolutionary selves, the desire to information forage. But that innate code in us has essentially been captured. Doom scrolling and the algorithms that go with it essentially put some of us in a kind of active addiction because it offers a kind of momentary dopamine hit or momentary pleasure, essentially for the enrichment of the wealthiest people in the world. I'm saying this, hopefully it's coming across with compassion because I'm also speaking about myself.
I mean, she's also speaking about myself. Absolutely. If people are spending more time on social media, which exercises our muscles to scan and scroll really quickly,
right,
I guess it makes sense that other more time-consuming activities like reading books would take a hit, right? But let me ask you this, Brittany. A lot of scrolling through social media is about reading. So talk about how like reading stuff posted on social media maybe hits the brain differently than reading books.
I am so glad you are asking that question because this actually came up in another conversation I had. I talked to Abdullah Shihipar about this. He's a research associate at the People, Place, and Health Collective at Brown University. And he said that studies have shown that when people read on screens, their comprehension just isn't as good.
I knew it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need everything printed out for me to really retain.
I understand. I totally understand. But, one hypothesis is that people are used to skimming text on screens. Think about how you might read an email that you get in your inbox or a social media post. Your eyes kind of glaze over the screen. So that's one reason why people might feel like they're not as good at retaining information if they're reading more on screens. But there is another emerging factor here.
I was looking up this study from Duke.
And they actually gave people 3 tasks, reading tasks, writing tasks. They then presented them with reading comprehension questions later. They found that when they were using an AI tool to do the reading task, when they used AI, there was like a 12% decline in people's comprehension. It was even more dramatic with writing. So that's what I worry about. When people get used to not writing their emails or using it to like summarize certain like large pieces of information, I worry that like we're entering a phase where you have even less comprehension, even in terms of like, forget reading books, but just like not engaging with the written word at all.
I also need to mention that 21% of U.S. adults are illiterate or functionally illiterate. So, you know, it's not always an issue of whether or not people want to read, but rather if they can at all.
Right, totally. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for bringing this to the show. This was super fascinating.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Globalization mandates, of course, from the most powerful white people, these blackouts. You have a totally energy independent state like Texas, plenty of natural gas, oil, gasoline, coal. They were forced to keep up with the mandates and convert up to 20% of their power grid to green energy by 2021. Green energy being wind, solar, hydro, battery, etc. So that 20% freezes over. And the 80% that's left, that always is work, the oil, the coal, the gas, is not enough to supply the rest of the state. So they have to cut off certain parts of the grid to keep it working. And this is what's going to happen in 2025 when that green energy is mandated to be 50% of the grid. What happens when we have a snowstorm then? And what happens in Chicago and New York? I mean, it's cold most of the year here. So this green energy thing that they've been pushing through this Green New Deal, and 5 years ago this wanted to happen in Texas, but they were forced to take fully, perfectly functioning parts of their grid and convert it to these green energy, and now that green energy freezes over and the rest of the grid is all vulnerable.
It was 4 years ago this week that a devastating power failure left millions of people in Texas freezing in their homes for days. Hundreds of people died. Since then, state officials say they've improved the Texas power grid. But as Mose Buchel from member station KUT reports, new challenges have also emerged.
This is a tough time of year for Minal Shah and her family. In February 2021, their elderly mother, Manjula, died after the power went out in their Austin home. As the temperature stayed below freezing for days, the family tried to keep her warm. They ultimately called an ambulance, but Manjula succumbed to hypothermia at the hospital.
Just the other day, I was sleeping and I woke up and then, of course I started thinking of my mom because this is the time when it happened. And, you're questioning yourself, well, what could you have done more? And you always kind of get into that mindset, well, did I do enough?
Since then, she says everyone in her neighborhood is better prepared for emergencies. Many have bought home generators. Still, they get nervous when a winter storm comes in.
Well, it's just a little anxiety that, hopefully the power doesn't go away this time.
To calm people's fears, state leaders point to the growth in power generation since the blackout. At a speech this month, Texas Governor Greg Abbott touted a public fund that gives incentives for companies to build natural gas power plants that could deliver 10,000 megawatts to the state.
That's enough to power more than 2 million homes.
But there's a catch. Texas operates its own grid with no major connections to neighboring grids. That means the work of keeping pace with fast-growing energy demand in the state is a priority most every legislative session. Just this week, the state grid operator reported that energy reserves may drop low enough to threaten grid reliability in extreme scenarios by 2026.
We must add more power this session to better fortify our grid.
With energy demand expected to skyrocket here, thanks to population growth, an energy-hungry oil and gas sector, and a boom in data centers, it's tricky for energy analysts to answer everyone's big question since the blackout. Is the grid fixed?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a fun one.
Joshua Rhodes is an energy research scientist at UT Austin. He says after the blackout, Texas lawmakers put in rules to winterize power plants to keep them running in the cold. The state power grid has also seen a boom in solar that's helped meet peak demand, especially in the summer, and a boom in utility-scale energy storage that helps year-round.
Texas didn't do it for an energy transition reason at all, but we just made it easy to build things here, and so people started building things here.
In the last week, 4 energy analysts told me Texas has faltered in other ways. The state has not improved energy efficiency standards since the blackout. Lawmakers have rejected joining up with neighboring power grids. Beth Garza is an Austin-based energy consultant. She says while state leaders want to build more gas power plants, that takes time, and they've not increased oversight to ensure gas supply to those plants.
And there doesn't seem to be a political appetite to address that aspect of the gas industry here in Texas.
In the end, the only true test of whether the Texas grid has improved may be another massive winter storm like the one in 2021. With severe cold fronts hitting the state more frequently, that's not something Minal Shah, the woman who lost her mother in 2021, wants to be around for. When I called her to catch up, she said she was actually heading out of state for a reunion with old friends.
I am in Dallas Airport right now on my way to Fort Lauderdale.
She says at first they talked about meeting in Texas, but then she thought, what if a winter storm comes and knocks out the power?
We just couldn't take that chance.
So they decided to spend February in Florida instead. For NPR News, I'm Mose Buchel in Austin.
Right now, people don't know, but Kansas has a high tuberculosis outbreak, the largest the county has ever seen. And with an administration like this, again, this is something that's going to compound on the communities.
Wyandotte County, Kansas is experiencing one of the biggest tuberculosis outbreaks in recent U.S. history. Experts say the outbreak is winding down, but emails obtained by the Kansas News Service show turmoil between the state and Wyandotte County health departments. Kansas News Service reporter Beck Shackelford-Wanganga and managing editor Stephen Caranda give us a behind-the-scenes look at whether or not this tension hindered outbreak response.
So, Beck, how did this whole outbreak in the Kansas City area start, and how big is it?
So the first case associated with this outbreak was reported in early 2024 in Wyandotte County, Kansas. They really went up in the summer, though, the case numbers did. Small clusters of tuberculosis cases happen from time to time, but this was much larger. As of last Friday, 67 active cases of tuberculosis were identified as part of this outbreak since it started in 2024.
Who was handling the tuberculosis outbreak in the beginning, and what other groups stepped in to help?
Early on, the Wyandotte County Public Health Department was the primary agency responding to the outbreak. When cases really started to spike in the summer, though, the CDC and Kansas Department of Health and Environment got involved. That's pretty normal in a situation like this. Tuberculosis takes close contact to spread, but it is a serious disease that can kill people if it isn't treated. And 2 people died from this outbreak in 2024.
I know you've been working on this for months. You got a tip that there were issues with the response, and we filed an open records request. After digging through hundreds of emails, what were the issues that came up as the response was underway?
According to the emails we obtained, things started out really good, but then I'd say around early August that relationship soured. Wyandotte County Public Health Department's director at the time, Elisha Caldwell, and the other agencies started clashing. He and the state health department staff went back and forth about things as basic as meeting spaces. Caldwell alleged KDHE created what he called a toxic workplace environment and said, quote, KDHE will not rule our health department. After back and forth in November, the state ended up taking control of the TB response, but then last week we learned Caldwell is no longer director of Wyandotte County's health department.
Based on these emails, it wasn't just a problem on one side of the working relationship, was it?
Yeah, that's correct. In what appeared to be an accidental reply-all kind of situation, the secretary of KDHE, Janet Stanek, criticized Caldwell, but also sent it to him and set off a fresh round of conflict.
After all of this, do we know if this conflict ultimately hindered the tuberculosis response?
It's hard to say because we didn't hear much from either health department. I reached out to Caldwell and he said he's passionate about public health in his community, but he's not ready to talk about his departure. We sent questions and Wyandotte County's health department told us they couldn't comment because it was a personnel issue, and KDHE told us the relationships they maintain with local and federal partners are important to everyone in the state and they will continue to collaborate. But sources who worked on the outbreak told us a different story. They spoke on the condition of anonymity because they feared for their jobs or hurting their careers. And they said there were disagreements about how to treat patients and a lot of confusion when the state took over. Dr. Alan Greiner, Wyandotte County's public health officer, did talk to me about the situation on record. He says Caldwell pushed out one of the main physicians working on the outbreak. He said she'd developed trust with the community affected by this outbreak, and her removal was really hard on patients. Greiner says he feels like they got lucky with how things worked out, given how tumultuous the response was.
Sounds like while the agencies won't really say much, it's pretty clear this conflict behind the scenes did not help the tuberculosis response. So right now, what is the current state of the outbreak? Should people in the Kansas City area be concerned?
By all reports, the outbreak is winding down. So a lot of the patients have completed treatment and are cured of tuberculosis now, and we're not seeing as many new active cases as we did over the summer.
Let me ask you all this. I was talking to one of my sisters last night. I said, what are the most expensive foods in the world? That's a question, class. What are the most expensive foods in the world? Okay, he can get an A. That's one, right? Go, class. Truffles, caviar, not oysters. And chocolate.
It's the day after Valentine's Day, and I'm guessing a few of you still have some chocolate laying around. According to the AI overlords that scour the internet on our behalf for answers, Americans buy about 58 million pounds of chocolate on Valentine's Day each year. Who knows if that estimate is correct, but the point is, it is a lot. It amounts to billions of dollars in chocolate sales. But as we've reported in the past, nearly 2/3 of the world's cocoa beans are grown in West Africa, where forests are cleared for farming and beans are often harvested by children or underpaid adults. And as our appetite for cacao shows no signs of slowing, these downsides have forced some to look for an alternative. Enter the tech sector. A handful of food tech companies have thrown their weight behind lab-grown or cell-cultured chocolate. And however you or I feel about lab-grown food, the idea of Petri dish chocolate is pretty fascinating. Good Food's Julia Child Fellow Gabrielle Glick visits California Cultured to find out how lab-grown chocolate is produced, what it tastes like, and if it's coming for your Snickers bar anytime soon.
California Cultured is headquartered in Sacramento. Its lab is tucked away in a nondescript warehouse park. All gray, no green. It's hard to imagine they're growing anything here, let alone a tropical plant like cacao. I met Alan Pearlstein, the company's founder, in a cafe right next to the lab. Thank you. He was hard to miss. California Cultured hat, California Cultured shirt. Alan's a food tech guy at heart and got his start working on cell culture, aka lab-grown meat, over 15 years ago. Since then, he's worked in all sorts of cell-based food labs. For him, the chocolate problem was like a nail, and cell culture, a hammer.
I sort of started cobbling together these processes and technologies to actually see, is this actually possible? Can you make real chocolate? Can you do it at a decent price? Can you do it at scale? And that led to sort of the formation of California Cultured.
In the world of lab-grown meat, entrepreneurs have been asking these same questions for years. But according to Alan, growing chocolate in a lab is more straightforward than growing meat. After chatting in the coffee shop, we headed over to the lab. And Alan introduced me to California Cultured's head of strategy and products.
All right,
Steve, you're up.
Steve Stearns is a former chef. He used to work at the famed Noma restaurant in Copenhagen. After years spent in the kitchen, he transitioned to food science. Steve was drawn to California Cultured for the company's emphasis on sustainability and the opportunity to use science in pursuit of flavor. Plus, he loves the complexity of chocolate.
Thousands of different molecules play into sort of the final flavor profile of a chocolate.
The smallest of adjustments can unlock a new note, and 1 degree of difference in temperature can mark a flavor shift. In a lab, you can control all of that.
Never given an audio lab tour before, so.
When you walk in, the first thing you notice is the humming of lab equipment. The whole space is about half the size of a basketball court. The company is in the middle of a renovation, so right now, things are a bit cramped. There's a handful of people working on their laptops, and a couple technicians, pipettes in hand, hunched over an assortment of lab stations. Like traditional chocolate, lab chocolate starts with a cacao pod. These pods are shaped like a football and can come in a variety of colors: green, orange, purple. California Cultured needs just a single pod to grow a theoretically infinite amount of chocolate. And they source their pods from around the world.
We might have some rare varieties that are hard to grow on the farm that can be easier to grow in biomanufacturing. You can think of like your criollos for cocoa, which are really difficult to grow.
Criollo cacao is one of the world's most prized and rare varieties. It was cultivated by the Maya and Aztec. After choosing a nice variety, a healthy pod with a good flavor profile, technicians cut the pods in half, revealing the cacao beans. Then they extract cell material from the beans. Since they're inventing this technology, some of their equipment is improvised. The cells, for instance, are stored in a repurposed pizza dough fridge.
It's basically used to proof dough. If you're like making sourdough or something, it was kind of perfect to store our cells because plant cells love the specific temperature and humidity that goes on in here.
When they're ready to kickstart the culture, technicians cut off a little clump of cells and mix in a nutrient broth. Some water, sugar, and plant hormones. The liquid gets swirled around for a few days, and then it's time to ferment.
Just gonna grab a flashlight really quick.
The fermentation step takes place inside of a black fabric pop-up tent. Steve told me that the cells seem to do best in the dark.
I think a picture to paint would be, if you've ever seen a home brewing kit and you've seen these fermenters that are just built out of either plastic or glass that people make beer in. It's literally what we're doing with these plant cells.
The whole setup is kind of DIY looking. And I notice it says Goose and Whiskey Town.
Yeah. We nickname all of our fermenters.
After 3 to 4 days in the fermenter, the cocoa cells are ready to be harvested and dried. At this point, they look like a pile of crushed up bran flakes. These brownish flakes then get the same treatment as traditional cocoa beans. Drying, roasting, grinding. But this all happens much faster. It takes 5 years for a cacao tree to produce fruit. California Cultured can turn their bean cells around in roughly a week. And the lab-grown chocolate is lead-free, cadmium-free, deforestation-free, child labor-free, you name it. They've even figured out how to up flavanol content. That's the ultra-healthy compound most notably found in dark chocolate. But the question I'm sure you're all asking, how does it taste?
So we're trying a dark chocolate, which is made from a varietal of Trinitario cocoa beans, which is from Trinidad and Tobago, but they're grown here in California in our lab. This is a 70% dark chocolate.
Steve handed me a small vacuum-sealed bag. Inside were 3 pieces of lab-grown chocolate, shaped like coffee beans. He gave me one and took another for himself.
Getting a lot of nice even melting going on from a nice well-tempered chocolate. Up front, you get a lot of like earthy, grassy notes, and then as it melts onto the back of your palate, you get a lot of fruit-forward notes, a lot of like dark cherries and a little bit of raisin going on, and then you get a nice lingering like kind of caramel aftertone when it goes down your throat. It's quite pleasant and creamy too. Cheers.
Raisin is really the right word.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting the snap wasn't as aggressive as it might be if you were going for like a dark chocolate bar and you really have that like shattering bite. It did kind of just sink, your teeth sink into it. It was good. Fruit forward chocolate isn't my favorite, but they've got a more standard milk chocolate too.
We've given out samples to about 20,000 people at this point. The most common thing is, oh, it's chocolate.
And that's the point. It's not roasted carob disguised as chocolate. It is chocolate. The hope is that if you put it in a Snickers bar, no one would notice. Plus, that's where they'd be able to pack the biggest sustainability punch. The huge need for commodity chocolate, like the kind found in your Halloween candy bowl, is a major reason for deforestation and human rights abuses.
There's a growing gap in the supply and demand in the cocoa industry right now, where the amount of chocolate that is available on the planet is not enough to supply the masses with chocolate.
After a series of low-yield years, cocoa prices have soared. From January 2024 to January 2025, the price per metric ton nearly tripled. If California Cultured can produce enough chocolate at the right price, they're in business. But they can't make enough just yet. So instead, they've opted for smaller scale options. That's CEO Alan Pearlstein's game plan.
Sort of the idea is we could first establish trust with consumers, showcasing our ingredients, then working on scaling up this technology, bringing prices down low enough that we can eventually start producing at enough volumes to supply a large user of chocolate, like for M&Ms or Snickers or something else.
They're collaborating with Japanese Meiji chocolates, known for making cookie chocolate snacks like Hello Panda or Meiji Mushroom. California Cultured's first products are scheduled to launch towards the end of 2025 or early 2026. Alan and Steve seem confident that they can grow their company into a chocolate giant. Steve even thinks the idea of lab-grown in California chocolate can be appealing.
Chocolate grown in California seems like a fairy tale. The plant's just not suitable to grow here. And so it's cool to think that this might be the only type of chocolate that's ever grown in California.
The question is, would you eat it?
Would I eat it? Well, I'm gonna eat it. So here we go. I have this giant FedEx box. It arrived at my house. I'm like, what is it? What is in here? I got 2 of these packages, like what you described. I'm just going to open one. It smells like chocolate. So Gabi, did you feel weird when you first were about to take a bite, or did you just pop it in your mouth without thinking? I don't know if somebody of my generation has a different relationship to ick factor than a younger person like yourself.
Yeah, I think that generational ick difference is a good theory. A lot of the younger people I talked to, kind of people my age, were saying that they would be really excited to try the chocolate and just more curious to see what it tasted like. So I think that's definitely a possibility. I had a slight ick, but more so was just curious. Did this actually taste like chocolate? Could I tell a difference?
It's unbelievably aromatic. And as I'm holding it, it's starting to melt. So I'm going to pop it in my mouth.
Yeah.
It has something about like a bean to bar type of chocolate where there are a lot of different notes. I definitely taste the raisin. And there's a brightness, like an acidic element that comes into play. Mouthfeel, which I think is really, really, really important. In chocolate, I think it's one of the main reasons why we love it, not just the flavor, is really good. So interesting.
Are you still feeling some kind of ick, or has your brain
really
accepted?
Interesting because I've tasted lab meat. I mean, not Impossible Burger, but actually like a piece of like faux chicken. And that, I have to say, really creeped me out. This less so. And I think it's because it's chocolate. I mean, I have to say it's a very smart thing to do because the overwhelmingly positive nature of our interaction with chocolate is easily overriding the ick.
Yeah, I kind of had the same experience. When you eat it, you can't help but just associate it with all your past memories of eating a chocolate bar or a piece of chocolate and all those positive feelings. Your brain kind of puts it in the same category because it really is.
Yeah, it's chocolate. So tell me, if we zoom out and look at the big picture here, what do you think the possibility is of this taking off? I mean, I'm thinking about all the hype around Impossible and Beyond Meat, which are different from cultured meats, but regardless, offer a meat alternative. And neither of those products seem to have made much a dent in the meat market, and sales seem to have tapered off from their launch.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that question as well. So I ended up talking with a chocolate expert. His name is Howard Yana-Shapiro. He spent quite a bit of time. He's the retired chief agricultural officer at Mars, a plant scientist, geneticist. And I kind of posed that same question to him. He has this long history with chocolate production. And he, while excited about kind of the science experiment nature of lab-grown chocolate, was a realist. And he basically said to me, look, this isn't going to replace conventional chocolate as we know it. Even thinking about something like Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods, I found this study from the Good Food Institute, no affiliation with our show, and this was in 2023, and they found that plant-based meat and seafood accounted for just under 1% of retail meat sales. So Howard was saying, look, if this gets to 10% in my life, that'd be amazing.
Did you talk to any cacao farmers? I wonder what they think.
Yeah, I did. I ended up talking with Veronique Mbita. She is the founder of Bantu Chocolate. It's a bean-to-bar operation, and they harvest beans from her mom's farm in Cameroon. And I was interested in her take. And she said when she first heard about lab-grown chocolate, her initial reaction was fear a little bit. Is this going to take away jobs from farmers? Is this something that's going to end up dominating the industry? But her conclusion I thought was really interesting. She said, look, I think there are always going to be people who want the real thing, and that's what's going to keep this industry going and traditional cacao farming going. And I thought that idea of the real thing was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be those of us who want like locally made bean-to-bar chocolate and really want to celebrate the artisanal nature of the whole process.
I think an interesting kind of pushback I got throughout this story was people saying there is some kind of specialty premium nature about lab grown. So maybe it does have that kind of appeal to a premium market, that story of made in the lab in Sacramento, that could be appealing.
To whom?
To so many young people I talked to. When I told them about this story, people living in California, they kind of reacted to it as if I was talking about some kind of local coffee roaster.
Wow, I have to say that is a generational gulf. Thank you so much for pursuing this story.
Of course. Very interesting. I'm glad I got to try them.
That was Good Food's Julia Child fellow Gabriella Glick reporting on the lab-grown or cell-cultured cocoa movement.
Ellen, this wasn't some public service announcement. It was an online warning by the FBI aimed specifically at women in Cleveland.
Give me some credit, will you, Joe? I happen to be a pretty good judge of character.
Look, I'm not trying to freak you out or anything.
No? Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it.
I just think you should be careful. That's all.
Do you think this is easy for me? I finally connect with someone I like who seems to like me. I'm scared enough to meet him for the first time without you telling me he's Charles Manson.
I didn't say that.
Besides, it's not like he's some stranger. I've been chatting with him every day for over a month.
I know. And he's probably as great as he sounds. But what if he isn't?
Now, if you're at a point in your life where you're looking for a romantic partner, then you almost certainly know about or have considered the apps. A Pew Research poll from 2023 found that 1 in 10 American adults in a relationship met their partner on a dating app. But how safe are those apps? A team of journalists undertook an 18-month investigation into the Match Group, which owns Tinder, Hinge, and other online dating apps used by millions of people every month. They found that the company is slow to ban users after they are accused of assault and other bad behavior. I spoke with reporter Emily Elena Dugdale. She worked on that investigation, which was produced with the Pulitzer Center's AI Accountability Network. In your reporting, you start with a very disturbing case. You point to a case involving a cardiologist in Denver who was just sentenced to a lengthy prison term after a jury convicted him for sexually assaulting and drugging multiple women. How is Match Group involved in that case?
Yeah, so Stephen Matthews used Match Group apps Tinder and Hinge to match with and then sexually assault and drug women. He was reported in the app as far back as 2020, but was able to continue using them and assault women for years. He was only stopped when a survivor went to the police. In fact, after he was reported, he was even featured as a standout date on Hinge, which means the app actually promoted his profile to women looking for matches.
You wrote that Match Group actually dismantled safety efforts that they rolled out 5 years ago after pressure from Wall Street investors. What happened?
Yeah, so on the heels of some bad press, Match Group created a new safety team in 2020 and promised to release what's known in tech circles as a transparency report, which would tell the public about the number of people reported for rape and other bad activity on their platforms so that users can assess their risk. Basically, it would give the public an idea of what's happening under the hood in terms of harm. 5 years have passed, but that report hasn't been published.
Why not?
Good question. We got hundreds of internal company documents. They showed the company waffled over what information to keep secret. And one employee wrote that they felt pressured to rush through safety checks and cut corners. They wrote, quote, "The obsession with metrics and having to stick with them is frustrating and potentially dangerous. This is not the way we were meant to work, and people's lives are at risk."
What does Match Group have to say about all this?
So we sent Match Group a 4-page statement detailing everything we found. The company responded with a short statement. Match Group said it was an industry leader on safety, using, quote, harassment-preventing AI tools, ID verification for profiles, and investments in communicating with law enforcement. They said that they are committed to doing the work to make dating safer on the platforms, but that's not what we found when we tested their apps. We partnered with the Markup, who led an experiment where we created dating profiles that we reported for sexual assault and then were banned. We found that users could quickly create Tinder accounts with the exact same name, birthday, and profile photos used on their banned accounts. They can also hop over to Hinge and other apps without changing those details. And that cardiologist I was talking about earlier, he was sentenced to 158 years in prison. The reality is, if he were released today, he could get right back on a dating app.
The same company owns these apps. Why don't they ban bad actors across platforms?
One of the issues when we talked to employees was just that it takes a lot of human labor and time to be able to thoroughly investigate these cases. It takes sometimes hours. We quoted one of these employees, Michael Laurie, who said, he was spending hours and hours sometimes on a case and felt a lot of pressure to speed up. And so I think, unfortunately, it's just that these are expensive hires and the company really wanted to go more cheap route. And so a lot of that work was outsourced to folks who don't have that same level of experience.
Some might argue, well, millions of people use these apps and they have some bad experiences, but people who meet people in other ways have bad experiences too. Like, what would you say to that?
I think that the issue here is that Match Group knows that there are people on their apps who are on there to harm others. And they could actually share that information so that users could really assess their risk and decide whether or not they want to use that platform.
That is Emily Elena Dugdale. She is an investigative reporter who looked into the safety of dating apps. You can read her reporting in The Guardian, The Markup, or The 19th. Emily, thanks so much for sharing your reporting.
Thanks for having me.
New York, New York. Okay, this week we're talking kids, we're talking babies on trains. We're going to start with the kids. First, Stephen, you reported today that a New York City public school student had their Omni card flagged for fraud. How's that even possible? What happened? Why is it notable?
Well, let's start with Omni for students.
Okay.
That's new this school year. In the fall, all students who live more than half a mile from their school got a brat green Omni card.
That's what we're calling it now.
It's the color. It's
Okay.
that greenish, trendy green.
Mhm.
And it's different than previous Metro cards for students because it's good for 4 rides a day, every day of the week, even weekends and during the summer. Pretty nice capabilities. And of course, something this good has some restrictions. The card is only for the student that was issued the card. And immediately, you may recall after these came out, we saw them pop up online for sale, which is of course not allowed. Those cards were deactivated.
Yeah, and the city has a big interest in preventing people or students or anyone from abusing these cards. The money for the program comes right out of the city coffers. That's our tax dollars. But there's a really good reason for this. There's 1 million plus public school students in the city. The MTA and the city want them to pay the fare like everyone else to get to school. If some of the other programs, when you lose your card, what are kids going to do to get home or get to school? They're going to evade the fare. So there's a balance that they're trying to strike here.
The MTA is also trying to crack down on that culture of fare evasion that we've talked about so many times.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do they track fraud with this? And we got an inside look this week when we got our hands on an email that was sent from the Department of Education to a parent whose kid's card had been flagged for fraud.
Yeah, I really want to hear what happened here. How does an Omni card get flagged, and who's monitoring it?
So there are really 2 parts to this. First, the MTA is monitoring the cards, but they insist they just have card numbers. They don't know the individual's name or any personal info attached to that. But if their computers detect, for example, the card isn't being used near the school it was assigned, it gets flagged for fraud. Also, if it's not being used at all, it's also flagged. And now the MTA insists that that's all it does from its end. The Department of Education then contacts any student whose cards are flagged for fraud. So this email that I mentioned that we got, sent from an administrator at the DOE to a parent, in this instant, the parent claims that their student took their Omni card to school, so the parent used the student's card to get to work, and it was flagged for fraud. But the email to the parent revealed more than what the MTA had claimed. The email said, quote, the MTA expects the first use of the Omni card to be near the home address, the second stop to be near the school, and the final stop of the day to be near the home address. There's also part of this program is they can take extra stops. Like we said, there's 4 a day, so they can go to after-school appointment or an activity. But all of this has raised concerns with privacy watchdogs. Here's Albert Fox-Kahn, the executive director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project.
It's so easy to imagine really vulnerable kids who are going to be falsely flagged by the system. Someone who is evicted from their apartment and changes where they're commuting to and from, or is couch surfing with family. They might be falsely flagged. So often these mass surveillance systems aren't just invasive and creepy and prone to abuse. They're prone to get it wrong.
The MTA insists it's not tracking people, it's just identifying abuse in the system, and in this case it worked. A parent used the student's card. That's not supposed to happen. The DOE didn't dispute the info in the email, but did say it doesn't track students' immigration status or country of origin, hoping to put to rest, any concerns about, say, ICE, for example, using the system to track students.
Right, and there's a way that this is a rogue email, just kind of explaining it, but at the very least, what Foxconn and, the overall thing here is that there's at least some location data used in monitoring fraud with these student Omni cards.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on now to one of the most dramatic subway stories of the year. You might have seen this on social media. It was all over yesterday. So yesterday, a woman gave birth to a baby on a W train. Clayton, break it down for us. What do we know about the mother?
Yes, well, yesterday morning on a downtown W train, it was halted at Herald Square for a really, really unusual reason, right? Passengers flagged down the crew, saying a woman gave birth in one of the cars. Other passengers chipped in and kind of helped the situation, and it was kind of a very New York moment of people helping people in need, especially like this mass transit system that access our main public commons. The woman and her baby girl were taken to Bellevue Hospital, right, and are said to be doing well and in good condition.
Our reporter, Julia Hayward, actually spoke with a woman that was on that train. Her name's Brianna Brown, and she said it really was a team effort, like Clayton said. She said there were 2 women helping deliver the baby. Another man was sort of blocking the view for a little privacy. And at one point, someone was asking, does anyone have a knife or scissors to cut the umbilical cord? And another woman came over with like a Swiss Army knife, and that was used to cut the cord. This woman, Brianna Brown, is, I should say, active on TikTok, and as far as I've seen, posted maybe the only video of the baby being born. Here she is talking about the experience.
Like wow, like New York really isn't a real place. Like that's one of the jokes that like as a New Yorker like you have, because so many things just happen out of the ordinary that you wouldn't expect. Like you would never expect to get on the train and head to work, or you're just commuting and somebody would to just have a baby on the train.
I mean, yeah.
Right. And we also learned a little bit more about the circumstances that led to this woman, giving birth in a train, which is really unimaginable. Our newsroom confirmed that the mother is a 25-year-old woman from Florida. Back in the fall, when she was, early on or midway through her pregnancy, her family reported her missing. A detective on the case down in Florida said she was found a few days later, but at some point since then, she made her way to New York. She's been estranged from her family. Reporters at the New York Times published a story that said, they got in touch with her family, her siblings, and her mother, who were elated to see the news that their family has a new member. It is kind of a miracle that this all happened and no one's hurt, everyone's fine. But the center of the story is really kind of this woman who came to New York under dire circumstances.
Yeah. Now, I have no surprise at all that you guys went deep on this today. This is not New York City's first subway baby, right?
No, we found 2 at least recent examples, right? In 2012, a woman also gave birth on a J train at Chambers Street. Back in 1993, a woman gave birth on a 3 train at Wall Street. This happens from time to time, once in a generation. A lot of people, the joke that I've been making, a lot of people in town like to compete over who's a real New Yorker. If you're born on the subway,
that qualifies.
That's birthright. You're the realest of real New Yorkers.
I mean, fair enough. Yeah. Wild week on the transit system. Thanks so much, my friends.
Thank you.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
I think that the white people should be ashamed of the deplorable situation that has been existing in the Congo, which is not the fault of the Congolese, but which is the result of instigation by European powers who are fighting each other over the mineral wealth of the Congo. And now to make it appear that the Congolese themselves are criminals or brutes because they're reacting to these injustices that they've been victimized by is again ducking the question.
On Friday last week, the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels began marching into Bukavu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They were largely unopposed, but as they advanced, they executed children, according to the UN Human Rights Office. A spokesperson warned of a worsening security situation in eastern Congo, with reports of sexual violence and forced recruitment. Bukavu was the second major city to fall to the rebels after Goma, and they say they'll take their fight all the way to the Congolese capital, Kinshasa, more than 1,000 kilometres away. Orla Garin sent this report from eastern Congo.
I'm standing in a recovery room in Ndosho Hospital in Goma. There are 3 patients here on trolleys, all young men. And here in this hospital alone, there are 4 operating rooms in use all day, sometimes at night, to try to keep up with the volume of war-wounded civilians and soldiers who have been brought in.
Okay, so my name is Miriam Favier. I'm based in Goma for the International Red Cross.
We are here now at the Ndosho Hospital, which is one of the hospitals you support. You have more than 300 patients. You have beds for 146. How much pressure have the doctors and the nurses been under?
I think it's been a terrible situation for the doctors. They slept in the OTs. Our medical supplies were looted at the very beginning of the escalation of the conflict in Goma.
Tell me about the kind of injuries you've been receiving. Is it mostly gunshots?
It was a lot of gunshots. It was also an increasing number of explosive devices. And you have also pediatric war surgery because a lot of children were also wounded.
We meet some of them in a tent in the hospital grounds. David, who's 15, cries in pain. He was hit in the face by a stray bullet. In the next bed, 13-year-old Heshima winces as he tries to shift his weight. One of his legs is now a bandaged stump. His relative, Tantine, tells us what happened.
A bomb fell on the child, killing his parents.
Was there fighting in the area? Were there clashes between different groups?
It was a Sunday. It was the M23 who dropped the bomb. There was fighting between them and the army. They dropped the bomb, and I lost 6 members of my family.
While Tantine mourns, some welcome the M23 to Bukavu. It's the second major city they have captured recently. They prefer liberated. M23 say they are defending ethnic minority Tutsis. Human rights groups accuse the rebels and their enemies, the Congolese army, of killing and raping civilians. I'm at the edge of Goma. There are green hills all around in the distance and stretching out as far as the eye can see. There are rows and rows of white tents, some very scrappy, falling apart. I'm in a camp called Bulengo, one of several camps here for people who have been displaced by fighting. Crowds gather round us to say they are being displaced again by an ultimatum from M23. Among them, a young mother called Divine, who has a babe in arms.
We were here when they came and told us, you have 3 days to leave. We were scared because we have nowhere to go. The houses have been destroyed, there are none left. Hunger is killing us in the camp, but we don't see how we can go home to nothing.
M23 say they are encouraging voluntary returns, but that's not how it feels to many here. We saw an extended family setting off with what little they had tied to their backs, cooking pots, rolled up bedding and a wooden stool. The family are on their way now. They've told us it will be a 2-day journey by foot. Around the camp we've seen others who are packing up, getting ready to go. Many say they're frightened to leave, but they're also scared to stay.
Orla Guerin reporting from Eastern Congo.
Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation. What is everybody in Europe worried about now? White genetic annihilation. All these people from Syria coming up in here.
Germany stands at a defining moment. The snap elections on February 23rd will shape its political and economic future. And with the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's coalition, 4 contenders are vying for power. For the first time ever, the far-right AfD is ahead in the polls as it promises a different vision for Germany, including economic revival and stricter immigration policies. The race is fierce and the stakes are high. Who will emerge as the next leader of Europe's biggest economy? Our next report goes inside.
Germany is at a crossroads. A sudden snap election on February 23rd will decide its next chancellor, shaping the nation's future. With economic concerns, immigration debates and geopolitical challenges looming. 4 candidates stand ready to lead, and each brings a unique vision, hoping to steer Germany through uncertain times. Friedrich Merz of the center-right Christian Democratic Union leads the polls.
I will then claim to be elected Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany in the German Bundestag.
A seasoned politician and pro-business advocate, he promises economic revival. His Agenda 2030 plan includes tax cuts, military expansion and tougher immigration laws. And just like any other candidate, Merz envisions a stronger Germany both economically and globally. He insists on stricter asylum rules and permanent border controls. Though his stance on using AfD votes has drawn criticism, he remains the front-runner. And his slogan, "A Germany we can be proud of again," encapsulates his vision.
The question, however, is how much we will be able to achieve beyond the AfD in Germany in the future. The answer to this question depends on one very simple word. The word is the margin. How much margin will we have to all other parties?
Chancellor Olaf Scholz seeks another term despite a turbulent tenure. His centre-left Social Democratic Party struggles in the polls, but he remains steadfast.
We have to make sure that Europe overcomes the challenges of the future in a strong and sovereign manner and with its back straight. I am certain that we will be able to develop a clear position on this. And the second issue is how we can further develop transatlantic relations and also advance our own expenditure on security and cooperation for security in Europe.
Scholz prioritizes investment in infrastructure, higher wages and social welfare. He supports Ukraine and is committed towards NATO, pledging continued military aid. However, internal coalition struggles, economic woes, and rising immigrant-related crimes have weakened his standing. Some believe Defense Minister Boris Pistorius would have been a stronger candidate. Yet Scholz persists, banking on experience and stability to sway voters.
If you want to make sure that Germany invests in growth, that we expand justice in this country, that we have a stable pension, that we ensure that wages rise, the minimum wage, normal wages, that there's relief for the 95% who earn the most, you can't do that by deciding tax cuts for top earners, but by putting your cross for the Social Democratic Party of Germany.
Sondern indem man sein Kreuz bei der Sozialdemokratischen Partei Deutschlands macht.
Alice Weidel of the far-right Alternative for Germany is a controversial figure. Her party polls second overall, but leads in the country's east, fueled by frustration over immigration and economic struggles. Weidel calls for mass deportations, an end to Russian sanctions, and dismantling the EU bureaucracy. She appeals to young voters through social media, gaining momentum. She's also gotten a boost with outright support from billionaire Elon Musk, who was instrumental in Donald Trump's re-election. Following the America First tone, Weidel's slogan, Alles für Deutschland, echoes nationalist sentiment, but despite surging support, she faces strong opposition. And it's clear that no mainstream party is willing to govern with the AfD, limiting her chances of real power.
My
message to head of the Conservative Party Friedrich Merz is, Dear CDU, tear down the undemocratic firewall. You must realize the will of the voters. The AfD is ready. The voters want a blue-black coalition in the Federal Republic of Germany for a real political change. Because we have to save Germany, because our fatherland has gone into a blatant imbalance. No problem drives people as much as having to watch our cities become increasingly unsafe.
Vice-Chancellor Robert Habeck of the left-leaning Greens is a staunch environmental advocate. He champions clean energy, pushing for renewable investments. Habik also supports increased defense spending and Ukraine's NATO integration. However, past policy setbacks, including watered-down heating reform, dented his popularity, slipping the Greens to the 4th place. Though he remains firm on climate action, rejecting nuclear energy and promoting affordable renewables, but despite tensions with MERS, the Greens may still enter a coalition, and Habik's mission is clear: a greener, more sustainable Germany.
Germany is in a difficult situation. We are coming out of the traffic light coalition government. The weather is bad. People are flocking in crowds to Green Party. And not only flocking in crowds, but I also experience this as genuine curiosity about democracy and what it has to offer. And I'm hoping that something will emerge that will help us to escape from the gloom that we have all suffered here in Germany, regardless of the election results. But maybe we, the Greens and I, can make a contribution to getting the country back on its feet. And I think that's what the people here are coming to see us for.
With polls around the corner, coalition talks will be crucial. The CDU is expected to win the most seats, but forming a government would not be easy. Merz faces challenges in securing partners, while Scholz fights to stay in power. Weidel shakes the establishment, and Habik pushes for sustainability to carve his niche. Germany's next chapter unfolds soon. The stakes, nothing less than the future of Europe's largest economy.
The man, race, class, genre, and the dilemmas of black manhood.
Out of the death of an inmate at a prison in New York after he was beaten by corrections officers. Today, New York's Attorney General released body cam video and called what happened shocking and disturbing. Here's Sam Brock, and a warning, this video is graphic.
Newly released shocking video shows these correctional officers fatally beating an inmate, Robert Brooks. The footage, blurred and redacted by state authorities, shows officers repeatedly kicking and punching Brooks in the legs and chest and trying to jam an object down his throat. New York's Attorney General says Brooks was pronounced dead December 10th, a day after these interactions with correctional officers was recorded.
I do not take lightly the release of this video.
James says the video doesn't have audio because the officers involved failed to properly activate their body cameras. It begins with Brooks being carried inside, handcuffed and face down. He's then raised up, face bloodied, and punched in various parts of his body. Brooks was serving a 12-year sentence for stabbing his girlfriend. His attorney says his death is incomprehensible.
I was there with Mr. Brooks' son and his father and his brother. They all watched the video as well, and I think it was just the overwhelming shock. It was just felt so incomprehensible.
NBC News has not been able to reach attorneys for the 14 people under investigation, but the president for the Correction Officers Benevolent Association adding in a sharply worded statement, "The egregious and repugnant action of the officers who committed this heinous and fatal assault does not in any way reflect the values of the vast majority of correction officers, including my members." 13 personnel are currently suspended without pay. Another has resigned as the investigation continues. And yet, Tom, there are still questions tonight about what happened that led to the beating that we just saw. Tom?
Saying if it was not for the white people who practice racism, white supremacy, Mr. President Obama would not be in the White House?
If any black person who forgets that is forgetting a very important fundamental. He couldn't even been running. His name would have not been known. He wouldn't have had a white mother in Kansas.
And the man who pled guilty to the shooting of local teen Ralph Yarl has died. Andrew Lester entered a guilty plea last week, just days before he was set to stand trial.
And his death comes less than 3 weeks before he was set to be sentenced by a Clay County judge. Fox 4's Dave DeMarco tonight on the abrupt end to a case that made global news.
Prosecutors said they'd ask a judge to send Andrew Lester to prison for 5 years. But just 5 days after announcing that plea deal, Lester is dead. 86-year-old Andrew Lester was known to be in deteriorating health leading up to a planned trial this week for the 2023 shooting of then 16-year-old Ralph Yarl. He appeared before a judge last week in a wheelchair, pleading guilty to a lesser second-degree assault charge. The prosecutor's office said the plea deal would allow Jarl and his family to address Lester and his actions at a sentencing next month. Wednesday, they announced Lester's death. Sources tell Fox 4 he did not take his own life. The Clay County Prosecutor's Office said in a statement, while the legal proceedings have now concluded, we acknowledge that Mr. Lester did take responsibility for his actions by pleading guilty in this case. Our thoughts remain with both families affected by this tragic incident as they continue their healing process. They clarified, despite the guilty plea, Lester will not be considered a felon under Missouri law, and they'll move to dismiss the case. We asked defense attorney John Paserno, who is not a party to the case, about the legal distinction. It comes down to the fact Lester didn't live long enough to be sentenced.
If he'd received, for instance, an SIS disposition, which is a suspended imposition of sentence, the judge would say, I'm not going to impose a sentence upon you today. I'm going to place you on probation for a period of years. And then as long as you successfully complete your probationary period, he would not have a conviction.
Jarl's family released a statement saying news of Lester's passing brings a mix of emotion, but does not bring justice. They wrote, while Lester finally admitted guilt, it came at the very last moment after 2 years of stalling. That delay leaves our family reeling. They'd go on to say Jarl has a lifetime of carrying the trauma of that night ahead of him, while Lester escaped sentencing. You can read their complete statement on our website, fox4kc.com. In Clay County, Dave DeMarco, Fox 4 News.
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But, you know, when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
Damn you, Obama.
And now moving to Elon Musk, and specifically his father, Errol. He's reignited racist conspiracy theories, claiming that former First Lady Michelle Obama is secretly a man and that former President Barack Obama is queer. He made the outrageous statements during an interview on the Wide Awake podcast. And in an era where such insidious ideas can quickly gain traction, it's important to separate fact from fiction and leave baseless rumors in the past. Our next story has more.
Being a U.S. president means facing relentless scrutiny, praise and concern. But while most critiques revolve around policy decisions, some take a bizarre detour into the land of wild conspiracy theories. The latest example, Errol Musk, the father of billionaire Elon Musk, who has resurfaced a thoroughly debunked claim about former First Lady Michelle Obama. During an interview on the Wide Awake podcast, Errol Musk echoed an old conspiracy theory. He claimed that Michelle Obama is secretly a man, and former U.S. President Barack Obama is queer. His proof, a joke made by late comedian Joan Rivers in 2014, which conspiracy theorists have since twisted into a baseless narrative. Errol Musk stated that Michelle Obama is a man, and Joan Rivers mentioned it publicly. The comedian was found dead 2 weeks later. The senior Musk tried to imply some sort of shadowy cover-up, casually ignoring that Rivers passed away due to complications from a medical procedure, a fact well documented and completely unrelated to her remarks. But in the world of conspiracy theories, facts are merely inconvenient details. As soon as Errol's comments hit the internet, online users got a field day for making memes and presenting their opinion. Social media warriors slammed Errol's comment left, right and center. Someone said that if Michelle is a man, then how did she give birth to her 2 daughters? While one user totally dismissed the comment because can we even trust the Musks? Or we can just say like father, like son. Some users even dragged Elon Musk into the picture. This isn't the first time Errol Musk has made headlines for his offbeat claims. He's also criticized his own son Elon's parenting skills. He claims that the billionaire was absent from his children's lives and relied too much on nannies. He also weighed in on Elon's eyebrow-raising comment about pop star Taylor Swift, bizarrely stating that she was a fair game after Elon joked about having children with her. While some may brush off these statements as eccentric ramblings, they contribute to a troubling pattern of misinformation. The notion that Michelle Obama is secretly a man has been debunked countless times. Yet it continues to circulate in certain circles, fueled by figures who thrive on controversy. At a time when misinformation spreads faster than ever, it is crucial to call out baseless claims for what they are: nonsensical distractions. The Obamas, like any public figure, are no strangers to criticism. But turning political discourse into a tabloid-style conspiracy fest does nothing to further meaningful discussion. Maybe it's time we left these absurd theories where they belong, in the realm of bad internet hoaxes.
I turned the ISO up on my camera, and I have this dark photo of this flag waving, and smoke is, tear gas is coming down, and there's hardly any more people up the top. It just is weirdly over. You know, I walked 2 blocks, called the Uber. I just remember looking at who my driver was going to be, and I was so relieved that this driver was a black man. Because I really, honestly couldn't deal with any more white folks that day. I couldn't. I was just over it.
Houston man pardoned for his crimes during the January 6th attack on the Capitol is back in jail, this time for a previous charge of online solicitation of a minor. Katira Winfrey is live at the courthouse where a judge set bail for Andrew Taki. Katira.
Hey, Mia, Taki's solicitation of a minor charge goes back to 2016 before he went into federal custody. But today, prosecutors asked that his bond be raised to $1 million, significantly higher than the $20,000 bond he had before going into federal custody. Now, Taki is one of multiple people pardoned by President Trump in the January 6th riot. But prior to that, Taki had been out on bond. Prosecutors say the court can't fully ignore his role in the riot.
But obviously you can't ignore the fact that it happened because it explains a significant delay in time of when the defendant last appeared before the court. And so I think that the judge did an appropriate job of recognizing what happened and applying the law to the facts of the case. And so
he was released from Bureau of Prisons in Colorado, and he went home to mom's house in Texas, came back home to Texas. A few days later, the state comes and picks him up without a fight, without running, without any incident. He was basically waiting for the state to come pick it up like they were telling the media they were going to do.
And Taki's attorneys believe that due to the nature of the pardon, his release was immediate, likely providing little to no time for Harris County to pick him up. Now, if Taki does make his $25,000 bond, he will have to adhere to standard procedures in a case like this, limiting where he can go and prohibiting him from being in any place where youngsters are commonly gathered. Reporting live in Houston, Katira Winfrey, KHOU 11 News.
Now, I'm so glad that I found Jim Jones in time. I'm so glad I found Jim Jones in time. I'm so glad that I found Jim Jones in time. Oh my God, what shall I do? I'm so glad.
All right, now on to new developments in the cult-like group that has been linked to multiple murders across the country. And today, the leader of that group was ordered to be held without bail in a Maryland court.
Jack Lasota from Berkeley was arrested on Sunday, along with 2 other members of the Zizian group. ABC 7 News reporter Leslie Brinkley has the latest on this bizarre case.
3 suspects appeared in a Maryland courtroom Tuesday morning facing gun and trespassing charges, but they have apparent ties to a cult-like group called the Zizians with Bay Area connections. Prosecutors said 34-year-old Jack Lasota from Berkeley appears to be the leader of an extremist group known as Zizians that has been linked to 6 murders in 3 states. Also appearing alongside Lasota were Michelle Zajko from Pennsylvania and Daniel Blank from Sacramento. The 3 were arrested in Maryland over the weekend. AP reported they wore gun belts holding ammunition and possessed several weapons. A state attorney said Lasota previously faked her own death, leading her Bay Area family to declare her dead from a San Francisco Bay drowning a few years ago. The Zizians have ties to a 2022 murder in Vallejo and an attack on a landlord there. Suspect Michelle Zajko's parents were found murdered in Pennsylvania that year as well. Then in January of this year, the Vallejo landlord Curtis Lind was found murdered. Zizian member Maximilian Snyder was arrested and charged in what prosecutors say was a plot to prevent Lind from testifying in court. Snyder's fiancée, Teresa Youngblood, was then arrested in Vermont a few days later for killing a Border Patrol agent, and a passenger in a car was also killed. Snyder will be back in court in March in Solano County. Known as Ziz, Lasota publishes a blog about ending the human consumption of animals and espouses a theory that 2 hemispheres of the brain can hold separate values and genders that want to kill each other. A UC Berkeley professor who teaches a class on cults says cults are now inside homes online.
When we talk about cults, we're really talking about forms of belief that disrupt our social equilibrium. But there's no legal definition for cults.
A North Carolina landlord told ABC News that Lasota lived in a condo on his property recently with the Ziz member who died in the Vermont shooting. Police records indicate Blank was Zajko's housemate in Vermont. The connections are under further investigation. Lasota asked the judge in Maryland to be released, saying she didn't have the means to travel. She also requested a vegan diet. The judge denied bail, citing concerns about her being a flight risk and a danger to public safety. Lasota, Blank, and Zajko will be back in court on March 24th. I'm Leslie Brinkley, ABC 7 News.
Black people should stay away from each other except when they have a constructive agenda. That's a part of the black code, you might say, or the compensatory code covering that. Why? Because we're full of poison, that's why. Put there by the white supremacists. We're born bathed in poison. And then they turn us loose on each other. And the first thing we do start doing is messing over each other. We should stay away from each other. We're always talking about we got to get together. Not without an agenda. That's why Louis Farrakhan, when he called for the Million Man March, he laid out what? An agenda. And made it, and also knowing us, if it was told correctly, he said, when you get there, don't throw any trash down. Come in, take part in the ceremony, and as soon as it is over, get on them buses and get back where you came from. Now, I don't know whether he came up with that or somebody in his entourage or whatever. It was the correct prescription, because you cannot have black people milling around under any circumstance, not nowhere on this planet, with no agenda. Now, you know what's going to happen. All somebody's got to do is step on somebody's foot. Then it's MF this and MF that, and then 9mm popping all over the place. And everybody running and screaming. We're good at that. You can almost predict it if you get enough black people together with no agenda. I mean, you can almost feel it. I mean, you know, if you've been around, you know, you just kind of look around and say, uh-oh, there's about 7,000 of us here now. What are we doing here? Don't nobody know. Oh, yeah? You had better start getting away from there. Because all somebody has to do is just say what you're looking at. End of story. Complete pandemonium. Killing like you wouldn't believe. On a huge scale. And because What started it? Dude was looking at me, man. He ain't got no business looking at me. I don't know him. He don't know me. I don't want to know him, ugly as he is. Yeah. That's us. We call it black culture. It ain't worth 2 cents. Nowhere. Nobody with any sense would want to buy into that. E.T. or anybody comes here from the moon would want to buy into what we call and brag about black culture. Logically speaking, why? I am here, I just got here from the planet Krypton. I would like to speak to, let's see, what do I have here? Black people. I would like to know about what they do that they are most proud of. The first black person they talk, the average black male, and I'm not saying all of us, the first one that they walk up on, you better go back where you come from, MF. Black culture, so much for it. That's us. Hold up a mirror, really. And we've been so drunk on it so long, we brag about it. Not even out of the cradle of civilization. That's not to say that the white supremacists are civilized. They're the ones that started this mess and set it up this way. All right? They have us acting like this, and they intend for us to continue. And they will fund you. They will put up money behind you as long as you're doing something stupid. You start doing anything that looks like it's going somewhere that's going to make sense, the money is withdrawn. And we ought to know that by now. But if you're going, hey, you want to get into the drug business? No problem.
Context of White Supremacy. United Independent ASF. Worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, February 22nd, 2025, so I have been told. Our weekly compensatory call-in, not for spectators. If you have thoughts to share, the number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. For one, I think we should be here on Monday. Now I have to double check. I will post immediately online, social media, all that good stuff, Sunday, maybe even earlier. But for sure, once I can confirm and lock everything down, we should be here Monday, normal time. The only time that we broadcast at some wacky hour of the day or night is if we happen to speak to someone who lives beyond the U.S. borders. Any other time, all the other times, regardless of the program or the day, it is always 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So once I can confirm, lock down, Monday should be here normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I just have to make certain I will update at minimum by early Sunday morning. Anyhoodles, we yesterday recognized very briefly the 16-year anniversary of the Context of White Supremacy. The goal was not to broadcast for 16 years. The goal is replace white supremacy as soon as possible. So we have not been successful thus far. But we have been on our counter-racist grind for 16 uninterrupted years. We do not just sit around and rebroadcast other people's content. 16 years of original counter-racist broadcasting, and lots of actually taking Mr. Fuller's concepts. Many of them, he says, it's not to sit around and name call and squabble with other victims of racism. It is to take these counter-racist concepts and apply them to racist man, racist woman, racist child. Hopefully that has been on demonstration for 16 years here at the C.O.W.S, helping non-white people, victims of white supremacy throughout the known universe, better understand what it means to be classified as white, what the global system of white supremacy racism is, and how it works. The archives are available, well over 2,000 programs. Now, white people have certainly disrupted our archives and broadcast ability over the entire 16 years, so they've disrupted greatly archives, and I have to go back and re-upload content. Did some of that this week as well, and be working to do that as usual. You can always drop an email, which people have done, if it's, things to get re-uploaded, other than the book study of A Long Walk to Freedom, just because, wow, that is really lengthy and would probably take a good chunk of time to do nothing else, days even, to get all of that uploaded again. But for sure worthy, because I do reference that book on a pretty regular basis. And that's even linked to the book that we're reading now. Maya Angelou just mentioned Nelson Mandela in her memoir. We read Nelson Mandela's memoir, importantly so, Long Walk to Freedom. Anyway, then 16 of those years that we have been broadcasting, 13 years of the Catherine Massey Book Club. Reading is more important than watching television. Not my phrase. The grandsister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, her motto, she lived it, emphasized that all the time when talking to people classified as black. But hopefully we have modeled and listened to what she said, and not just, oh, that's a cool statement, yeah, read it, and then you get back to Netflixing. Hopefully we have done some reading. We've had lots of authors on, white and non-white, over the years, so hopefully we've done our small part on the plantation to try to fix this problem and greatly encourage non-white people to use their brain computers for some reading. Nonfiction. You can access those archives. They are abundantly available at YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podchaser, Amazon Music, Spotify, and it just goes on, other places where the cool podcasts hang out. But you should not have difficulties. Archives as well, even content that goes way back. It is archived. Feel free, go back and listen. Mr. Fuller's visits as well. Much obliged. And 16 years we have been listener supported for 16 years. Not that we have a massive budget or staff or anything of that nature. We are, kind of close to Army of One, which is exactly what Neely Fuller Jr. endorsed, but we do not have big corporate sponsors or even curbside sponsors. But 16 years, much obliged to all of the investors all throughout the known universe who have supported, invested in the context of white supremacy. Hopefully it has been worthy of your time and energy. Hopefully we have been accurate more often than not, and help some non-white people get a better, more accurate understanding of what racism, white supremacy is, how it works, and, equally important, specific things non-white people can do, say, not do, not say, that would help us replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Not name-calling black people, that's one, certainly. Hear, hearty endorsement. Mr. Fuller's 10-stop recommendation there, and I think that's been in practice. We don't have a habit of coming on here and coon and no-count Sambo and sellout and tether and I don't think that's, not been our track record. Any hoodles. let's see, I guess to start the books, I will start there. Now, I've had a number of different days that have been, wow, that was a haul at the library. I've had a number of times where that's happened, where I've gone to the university library specifically. Certainly the whole California hall, that, you know, would count, but that's something else. But just regular old days here at what I now consider the lame old University of Washington, since it's not Stanford or Cal Berkeley. Now it's just lame old University of Washington. So I go to lame old University of Washington, which is a federal depository. Like, I mean, you can take that for what it's worth. Like, it's probably way better than most of the libraries that you could access in this part of the world in terms of access to information, except we're talking about California. I go there and I'm searching for new, but what did I think my addition to our counter-racist code, Dr. Welsing said, reading more important than watching television. Gus T, just adding specifics, really. Victims of white supremacy should read. Make time. Turn off the TV, whatever you have to do. Cancel your Netflix subscription for 1 month. Have some discipline. Read one nonfiction book per year. So we just, brand new year. So that means before we get to 2026, read one nonfiction book you've not read before that is published this same calendar year, 2025. Now, for anybody out there who says, you know, hey, it's only February, give me time, contraire, mon frères. I said this last year, and I believe I said it in February of last year, that I don't think non-white people grasp. White people talk about racism all the time. It's in the newspaper all the time. Thus, the audio segments that we play on a weekly basis, generally they're talking about racism all the time, except for that chocolate report. But even there, they said the slavery, and let's see, you know. Books are published all the time and all over the world talking about racism. Like, it's like a daily thing. And I just don't think we understand that. I think with songs, Drake comes out with something to diss Kendrick Lamar or whatever it is, we'll know about that immediately. But in terms of books and literature that is about white supremacy, racism, I just don't think we grasp how much white people talk about and study their system. That's why they maintain control over the entire universe at this point. You could go and get a rackload of books that are 2025 publications, and there haven't even been 60 days to the year 2025, but I bet you it's racks more than 60 books that have been published, and I'm talking books that are specifically about racism. I'm not even just talking about any old kind of book, trout fishing, doorknob repair. I'm not even talking about, I'm just talking about books that are directly about racism in one of the areas of people activity. It's racks of them that have been published already. I go to old lame UW to nab some of these said books. Now, I really didn't have a massive objective. I thought I'm going to go and grab like 5, 6 books. That was the plan. February 19th, I ended up going and getting about 25 books. Half of them, I don't say half, probably about 30 to 40% of them published this year, and all of them are directly about white supremacy, racism. All of them. Now, some of these, as I said, they were published in 2024, and I'll do that as well. I'll try to check throughout the year, like what are, you know, some of the newer publications that have been published about racism. When I started emphasizing this, I said for lots of reasons. Just one, that is a total lie that white people are ignorant about racism, because who do you think they're publishing all these books for? You? Leroy? Lakeisha? Come on. Who do you think they're publishing all these books? And then a lot of times when you look, who wrote a lot of these books? Oh. Duh. So, white people are not ignorant about racism. And then you can also look and see what are the new terms. Mr. Fuller talked about that for decades, right? That's their primary weapon. What are the new terms? You can see, oh, there we go, white privilege, intersectionality. You can see when they start making up new racist jargon to confuse us, and then you can see how it spreads, as these books come out and start being read and promoted, and, hey, this new theory and all that other nonsense. You can be, and then even develop counters for this as you see this material coming out. Mr. Fuller did that, encouraged that, Dr. Welsing as well, continuing their legacy. So I go, like I said, I get like 25 books, and I've had this happen a few times where I've gone to the library where I didn't have anything specific that I was going to get, and then, wow, ended up being something where I got like 20 books, 25 books that are all about racism directly, indirectly. And I've even had some days where I've had to put an asterisk on the calendar like, oh wow, that was a massive library haul. The library haul was so massive and constructive, I think. I said immediately, I would normally think this way, but I said immediately, like, man, they say I'm impatient and, don't like kicking it with my black brothers and black cousins, fellow attempted counter-racists. Whew. If I can get half of these authors of these books, real talk, y'all don't have to make no guest suggestions this year at all, and we would clown all areas of, in fact, we would clown so hard in the most constructive of ways, even if we just got less than half of these books, if we got the authors. Whew, we would hit some of your favoritist subject areas. Man, there have been books published within the last 6 months. When I looked at it and I said, whoa, that almost sounds like somebody wrote a book saying that sex with white people is totally incorrect and an act of racism, not named Neely Fuller Jr. Wow. Or Pan. Wow. Even might be more than one such a book that was published in the last 6 months. Wow. Now, I kept looking. In fact, even, there were so many incredibly constructive books that I was excited. What did you find? Illiterate Negro Gus T. Renegade, what did you find? Now, I can't read 25 titles because that would be the whole program. Hey, maybe that would be the constructive thing to do. Everybody stop name calling and being discourteous. In fact, turn off that screen. Super Bowl is over, so we don't have no excuses now. Whoopee for the Eagles and the exciting whites. But that's all done now. So we can turn off the TV. We can kick it. 6 months, Negro History Month and all that, Women's History Month. You could check every box you could conceivably think of. You could get one book. Even one for 2025. In fact, you clean up. If you miss for 2024, you can snag 2. And you would be great. And read something that I suspect would be really interesting. Like, you might not even miss not having that Netflix subscription for 1 month. Give us a teaspoon of what you found at the library on February 19th. Will do. Malnutrition. That's hyphenated. Malnutrition, maternal health science, and the reproduction of harm. Can I get it one time for the throwaway children? Devontae Hart, is he? That is a 2025 publication. Malnutrition, maternal health science, and the reproduction of harm. Sounds like if you're thinking about having a non-white child, especially a child that's going to be classified as black, maybe you should look at that book. Book number 2, The Violence of Love. Thought that was such a great title. Race should be racism. Family and adoption in the United States 2 times for the throwaway children. Devontae Hart. I hope Devontae Hart is in that book. You get poisoned and drove off the cliff in California with all of your adopted stolen siblings. You at least got to go into the violence. It don't get more violent than that, right? The Violence of Love. Also a 2025 publication. Predatory Data. Book number 3, Eugenics in Big Tech and our fight for an independent future. Predatory data. And this apparently is a freebie, meaning that there is a link online that they want this book to be given away. So you can apparently download this one and take it and start reading immediately. You don't even have to have coins to purchase or borrow or none of that. You can have it right now. Predatory data. I think that might be a 2025 publication as well. Off-white. Oh my God. Who is ignorant about racism? Who is ignorant about racism in a world off-white? Central and Eastern Europe and the global history of race. Now you see how cowardly people get with these titles that should clearly be white supremacy, not race, but they get real pussyfoot about it. I don't want all the smoke now. Wait a minute, Brother Gus. We can't put no, I just said it twice now. The violence of love. It should be white supremacy, family, and adoption in the United States. But Devontae Hart, don't be pussyfoot. I don't want all that smoke now. I'm trying to get on the bestseller list. Off-white. Why can't we put racism? New York Times got a book list. I think I got a better chance of getting on the book list with race, not racism. But man, Jiminy Crickets, what is in the book Off-White? That is a mandatory read, and you might have to get your map out for that one. Now, we get to talking about a whole lot of things. Global system of white supremacy racism. Yes, Off-White. Now, this is another one now. Who is ignorant about racism? Who was the audience for this book? Did you know about Off-White, Central and Eastern Europe and the global history of racism? Did you know about this book? Do you have this on your bookshelf? This is a 2024 publication, so we even had time. We could have been slow and slacking on this one and got it late. What's so interesting about this here book, Off-White? I'm not going to give all the titles. I'll just kind of go through and go. Chapter 2. The Racial Contract, Whiteness Contract, and Central Europe. Chapter 3. Not Quite White. Chapter 5, Hungarian Indians, Race and Colonialism in Hungarian Indian Play. Indian play is in quotes. I have no idea what that means. Is that like blackface or put... Man. Chapter 6, you have to get your map out for this book. Peripheral whiteness, I said about the terms, and racial belonging and non-belonging accounts from Albania. How many of us have been to Albania? That's on your passport stamp. Do you need another one? You need another one? Let's see. Chapter 9, with the help of the great Russian people, for Patrice Lumumba, the invisible whiteness of Soviet anti-colonialism and gender emancipation. What? What? Do you want one more? Do you want one more from Off-White? The whiteness should be racism of Christian Europe, the case of Hungary. Now again, you would need maps for all of these places. Albania, what? Where? You find, but all of this is the system, global, of white supremacy. It seems like people that might kind of be close to tinkering, but not quite. That's even one of the chapters. Not quite white. You might not be Negro. You're not down there with Leroy, but maybe you can go to Brazil and be white. That might even be another chapter in the book. But again, this is off-white, Central and Eastern Europe, and the global history of race. Should be white supremacy, racism, but whatever. And one more? Do you want one more? Do you want one more? For Stanford, Gaming Democracy, How Silicon Valley Leveled Up the Far Right. These terms you couldn't say racist man and racist woman, but leveled up? What does that mean? Did white people need to be leveled up in the year 2025? Dang. Gaming Democracy. I don't think they made that one for free. Gaming Democracy, How Silicon Valley Leveled Up the Far Right. I think if you're a crypto coin investor or fan, you should definitely read that one, yes? So that's 5. Teaspoon. There were racks, and probably have been more published even since I was there. And did you know? Now, I didn't even tell you any of the sex ones. Plural. I didn't even give you any of the religion ones. There were a few of those that almost made me say, dang, did he say religion of white supremacy? Whoa, what is going on here? Wacky. It gave me pause because I took 25 books. Like, whoa, that's not every day. I don't go and take 25 unless I'm researching Jonestown, but that's, subject specific. This was just random. I said, wow, do we go to the library? Mama C was just talking about they put all that time, she and Nine Clemson Dad, and putting a library together for 00 Dimples. That's what valedictorians do, man. But that is not Negro culture. Facts. Sadly, that is not nowhere close. I even dare say I do not think that is counter-racist culture attempted. Not even close. Now, I say that pretty confidently at 16 years. Why would you say that at 16 years, Brother Gus? Well, most of the people that contact me, and this is even after I have spent years saying, and I think unambiguously so, please don't call in talking about television. Let's try to grow up. I think it's things more important. Some of the books I just said are a tad more important than watching Sanford and Son, whatever else happens to be on TV at the time. Many, many non-white people do not agree. We've had brawls and people call in and argue about that. We gotta talk about TV and call it interrupt, neutralize, and workplace racism. Did you see what's on Netflix? No, I did not see what's on Netflix. We're trying to talk about labor. I'm just concluding that. I'm just looking at the emails that I get. Most of the time, it is not, wow, can you believe what I found at the library? Can you believe what books I read? I'm trying to be like Dr. Welsing, or at least follow her. Suggest that is not the correspondence that I get most of the time. Most of the time, it is, look what I found on YouTube. Look what I found on Netflix. We're going to have to do way better. In fact, you can transition that right there to that segment on chocolate. Now, anybody says, Gus T, I don't care, you've been on for 16 years, 60 years, whatever. You are a failure, yes. You said it yourself because you haven't replaced white supremacy with justice. Isn't that true? Yes. Okay, failure. Sitting up here wasting our time playing chocolate 7. It was long, too. I'd have taken it if it was 3 minutes. It was like 15 minutes. That's the most important thing in the world. We're on the plantation, raped, beaten, Sade Robinson, Ralph Yarl shot at. All the important things happening in the world, and we got to hear white people talk about chocolate. Fake chocolate. For 15 minutes. What? WTH. WTH, Gus T. That's why I don't mess around with no black person. You in particular. I played it because, did you hear how scientific, and that was audio. KCRW, California Public Radio. I guess they didn't burn down. But I suspect that was a lot of the, you think they come to Leroy? Lakeisha? We're going to go in the lab and we're going to make chocolate from scratch. Got to get Leroy. Even delectable Leroy. Do you think that's what that is? We don't even have, all the STEM that they talk about, they don't even have black scientists, right? Did you hear how scientific? Each degree of temperature increase changes the flavor. Science. What Fuller said, we go to the bottom of the ocean to study everything. I mean, chocolate. We will get into it on Dr. Welsing. I found that whole segment, even, it gave me pause, like, dang, we can go through all this and go in the lab and concoct from scratch fake chocolate that is pretty good. Melts, chocolatey, melanated, if you will. You can do all this, but we can't. They got rocket ships to take you to Mars and all this goofy technology, but we can't replace white supremacy with justice? You can't get the AI bots to work on that? You got fake chocolate. If you're 80 years old, you can get an erection? Justice? Ooh. Can we figure out a way to get white people to stop calling Michelle Obama a man? How about that? You asking a lot. Give me one of them fake chocolate bars, and I'll think on it for a minute. Come on, man. Come on. I put that. You got the white scientists working on the chocolate. What do non-white people study? Read. What do we work on? We don't even go in the lab to do the ganja, the wacky tobacco. That's not all of us, but I mean, man. If they said, Gus T, I'll give you a nickel. You ain't got no budget. People don't rock with you like that. We'll give you a nickel for every email you get about books. Nickel for every, or matter of fact, you can make it a penny for every email that you get about a movie, something on Netflix or, YouTube, whatever. Some sort of video content that's not the news. It ain't Democracy Now. Ain't no local news in their area. Not the news. I would take the penny for the movies and such. It's not even close. Now, it might be the attempted counter-racists who do read a lot of nonfiction, they don't associate with Gus T. That could be. I have been told. I do not know how to talk to people, and I'm not professional. So that might be. But even still, the people that do contact me, most of y'all don't talk about no books. That is a part of why we are pitiful. To be on the plantation and sitting around watching TV all the time. I would even say, truth be told, it seems like that's just my general impression. I could be wrong. It's not all of us, but large numbers of victims of white supremacy, the extent of our counter-racist activities, social media posting, video watching, name-calling, and criticizing other non-white people. And that is the extent of what we do to counter racism. That also is worthy of great pity. Hopefully we have done lots more than that here at the Context of White Supremacy over 16 years. Do I think reading is that important? Yes. We are so uninformed about everything. Everything. They said in that report, that was the first report I started with, we don't read as much now. They said in general, they didn't mention anything about racism in that report, or non-white people not reading specifically. It was just in general in the U.S., people do not spend as much time reading books specifically, and they don't read as many books. We have book club for 13 years. Book club for 13 years, but they don't read as much, and they got lots of excuses, time, blah, blah, whatever. And they even included, importantly, you have a lot of people who don't have the ability to read well. Racist white women teachers to blame for that in a variety of ways, but that is a massive problem. I contend that having difficulties with reading comprehension and not wanting to read and get new information, all of those books, all of that new information, Harriet A. Washington, A Terrible Thing to Waste, that has so much great information. That is a newer book. I think that was like 2019. That's a newer book. If you're not reading newer information, oof. What Dr. Cambon said, we are at a disadvantage, and not reading new information, I would say that is one right there. And you even, them complaining, you have a significant population of white people now who don't read. White sacrifice, that's on them. You still got enough white people who read and are informed. The lazy, ignorant, illiterate white people, they'll just come and be shiftless on your job, and now you'll have to do more work to compensate for them. Neutralizing workplace racism on Thursday. We talk about that one all the time. Any hoodles, before we get to folks dialed in, the reading segment I just talked about, I played the segment about the Texas energy situation. Whew. Let's stand by our work. That clip from Thomas in New York is from 2021, just after the energy failure in Texas specifically. And that's Thomas in New York, not Thomas in Houston, not Thomas in Dallas, not Thomas in El Paso, Thomas in New York. That is one right there. Everybody, VGQ, you can say whatever you want to, but man, I do not appreciate when non-white people, victims of racism, especially people classified as black, come and talk to me on a subject matter. And I said this with him live on the program. This is not gossiping. It's in the archives, but I said this back then. And we even got a retraction. I do not appreciate non-white people coming and talk to me as though they are experts on something when you're not an expert about energy systems. You're not an expert about what's happening in Texas either. When was the last time you even went to Texas? Now, since 2025 was mentioned by Thomas in New York that things might be really bad then when they have to go with all these green initiatives, they didn't say nothing about that in the report. Same thing they said in 2021. Texas in general is very unregulated per white people, and their energy system is independent, meaning they're not connected to any of the other contiguous states. So if there's a problem, Louisiana can't help you do nothing. New Mexico can't help you do nothing. You are so-called independent. And because they're unregulated, they had said, hey, we got different climates now. They had failures for everything in 2021. Oil, gas, all of it. And in fact, even in the segment that we just heard from this week, they said, hey, they got a little bit of a boost from the green energy systems, exact opposite from what Thomas in New York said. And that's one thing I would say to all of us. We can do way better. Do not come talking to black people with no nonsense that you have researched on your phone or tablet or whatever, because we don't do that with white people. We don't go and speechify and pontificate with them and talk like we're an expert on a subject that we are not, because white people know that we're still. White people think Michelle Obama is ignorant and a man. She has an Ivy League degree. We don't do that with white people. We go and want to flex and show off a half-researched expertise with other victims of racism. That's not helpful either. Hopefully, I have not modeled that over 16 years. If I'm going to come and talk about something, we're going to have all the data together. If I talk about it with any sort of expertise at all, which most of the time I do not. I'm not going to tell you what's happening with the energy situation in Texas. One, I'm in Seattle, and we could stop right there. 2 time zones away. What do I know about their failures down there? Anyway, the dating apps companies, where they're not releasing information in a timely manner about all these abusers, the first thing that came to my mind was, if this had been me, Thomas in New York, Al Sharpton, retired firefighter, if this had been some Negro male on one of these apps, and they were, abusing and raping all of these folks, they would have shut that down so fast. Leroy's information would have been voluntarily turned over and all that. Man, come on. I suspect there's probably a whole lot of white dudes, Jeffrey Epstein's and my man Jeff Dahmer. It's those types, white men, on there doing it. It's the swangoness of it going on these dates and drugging folks and all of that. And then they talk about pussyfooting. And the second thing I thought of, Sade Robinson. Folks might not have heard that case. We've talked about it a number of times. It's been almost a year now. A young black lady, 19 years old, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 2 times for Dahmerland. But she was not just killed, but dismembered, scattered her body parts all across Milwaukee last year. I think some of her body parts even found out of the state of Wisconsin, unless my memory is bad. Trial for this suspected race soldier killer is coming up this year, I believe. But I think they might have met on social media, Sade Robinson and this suspected killer. And I think he might have even drugged her too, because they were at a bar. But I said, man, like, Slow down with all of that. The phone, the social apps, all of that. If you have children, and be talking to us. Go and get some of these reports that are talking about all of this. They were talking about people were using Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, pedophiles specifically, Jeff Epstein and them, they were using Facebook to go and rape children. Said it worked great. We can go and get pictures and everything, find out where they are, probably get coordinates for where they're located. Talk, if you have children, that's what you signed up for. You talk to your children about racism, you talk with them about sexual abuse. Mandatory. Talk to them about Sade Robinson, because I think she met her killer on one of those apps, unless I've been misinformed. Let's see. And to speak of January 6th, I said before, there should be an investigation. How many of those January 6th participants, how many of them previously or since then have got charges for sexual abuse, specifically child rape? Andrew Takei, his last name is Taake, down in Texas, where he got his pardon and they released him, and they were going to go and get him for these different charges for eliciting a minor for sexual activity, but they had released him, so then they had to go track him down and go through all this. Now some of these folks are saying that their pardons for January 6th should apply for cases like this too, even if it's child rape or whatever it is, child pornography, some of them. How many of these individuals got cases for child porn? I would like to know. It seems like it's not just one or two. How many? They said it wasn't just one or two military personnel who were involved. It was a high percentage. What's the percentage of January 6th insurrectionists who've got child sex charges? Let's see. Got the chocolate report. Obeezy is gay. Michelle Obama, First Lady, is a man that they've been saying this for years and years and years. I even found it wacky because I thought Elon Musk's family members or relatives, associates, I thought some of them were transgender, LGBTQ, all of that. That's so interesting to have his dad coming out and saying this, but whatever, all of that to be expected. And again, we are boys and gals. You can't be a man and a woman, so Obeezy, he's gay or whatever. And Michelle Obama, she's not even a female. We'll just say that's just a dude. And there's a long history of that sort of racist activity, masculinizing black females. Have we not been talking about SNL 50, Oprah Winfrey, played by all of these obese black males, Tracy Morgan, Kenan Thompson? We've been talking about this. David Alan Grier, he's not obese, but still. Played by, I've been saying, a long tradition of that sort of racist behavior on the part of white people. And the Zizians, last day I'll get in, and we get to the folks who are, I just said transformative experience of a lifetime, going to California, where I already lived. It wasn't like I was going someplace I had never visited. To go there, why? Jim Jones, People's Temple, and the cult and all that, even their LA connection. And to be back, I don't even think it's been 3 months yet, to be back in Bay Area death cult, connected to 6 deaths across the country, including a Border Patrol agent. What? Faking death? Isn't that in Jim Jones where they're faking the... I lost it. Are you serious? One, I did stop and think, were they talking about this in the news when I was there? What? I looked at the San Francisco Chronicle, daily when I was in San Francisco, and I even check the Chronicle now that I'm back in Seattle. I do not remember nothing about and even dig this now. That's the Zizians, Zizian, S on the end, I guess. Zizians, they're a cult connected to California, even though they got arrested in Maryland, Bay Area connection. Luigi Mangione, the white fella who killed this insurance CEO executive at the end of last year, he was in trial this week in New York, and he had all his white groupies out in the corner. "Whoa, we love you, Luigi," all that old nonsense, and they were giving him money too. Same thing they always do with these white killers. He got all that money. He worked at Stanford. They said, in fact, his parents thought he was in the Bay Area during the same time that I was there, and then he went and did the murders in December. Come on, man. Bay Area madness forever. And that's really just kind of California madness in general. Anyway, I don't even know what to say. And then with the Zizian specifically, every report has been, oh, these are intelligent white people, and they're all about transgenderism and veganism, and they want to release the planet from the dependence on animals and all of that. Why are you out killing all these people? And from the pictures that I saw, it looked like it was overwhelmingly people who would be classified as white. I think I maybe saw one person who would be not white, not black either, but overwhelmingly people that would be white. And they even said with all the so-called transgender, they said that when they raided the facilities, they had surgical equipment that looked like they were trying to do some of the removing gonads or sewing on a vagina. Or that's what I said. How you gonna have all that and then turn around and be like, Michelle, you know Michelle is Michael. You know that's a man, don't you? Yeah, that ain't the first lady. That's first man. That's first man. Put all that under what does it mean to be white? Even white dudes feeling insecure about their masculinity, so they got to tick on black people. Like, Obama, he's gay. Oh, Barack, he's gay. He's gay. That's not even a dude. In fact, he's married to a dude. Anyway, the number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. In fact, now I'm remembering Michelle Obama did not go to the inauguration. Love it. Black self-respect. And they tried to chide her, say you're not being classy. Whatever. She didn't even say anything. She didn't talk bad. I've never heard her, because they've been saying this for years. They've been saying this back when they were in the White House. That's like a decade ago. They've been saying this at this point for like 15 years or more. I've never heard her respond, go back, and who do these crackers think they are? Even after she got all that. None of that. None of that. Nope. I'm not going to the inauguration, and that's that. They go high. Excuse me. They go low. We go high. I just make sure to point that out. That is super tacky, trashy, and terroristic. That is about the best you can expect. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. I would even, in fact, this at the same time when white people are referring to each other as cucks. Isn't that it? Suggesting that it's something impugning your manhood and cocksmanship? Yes? Whatever. Folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share, line should be open. Proceed.
Hello?
Irie in Louisiana, your volume is a little low. If you could speak up, lots of black self-respect, por favor.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Hi, Gus. I was listening to your feedback about reading books that are recent, are relevant to being released in the current year. And I was trying to think of a solution to the problem. I don't know if it'll work. But first I want to make a preface that a lot of times I don't get a chance to read books at all now unless I read a little bit of a book or two before I work out, and I sit in the sauna for like 30 minutes before I work out. And then I'll try to read some more after I work out in the sauna. But in my functional daily life, I don't get a chance to, because I'm just bombarded like with, family stuff, or I have to work, or I'm looking things up that's relevant to current situations, because I think it's just a state of, we get put in a constant state of fluctuation it piles up on you. So to be able to have a chance to just sit and read a book regularly, even new or old, I don't really get a chance to. And a lot of times when I am reading for long periods of time, it's out of some type of dire situation. Like my whole last year, I was reading more legal briefs, and I'm not an attorney. but, ordinances, briefs, statutes, violence, to help other victims of racism, to the point I didn't have a chance to read any new books for real. I think I read one, though, but I had to do it piecemeal, like I said, it's sitting in the sauna, which I think it may have taken me like 3 months to read a book, that book, if I can think of it at that speed, which may be slow. And so, I don't know, maybe a solution is if we just team up. If somebody reads, some type of diurnal publication all the time, maybe that person's on the team for that. They keep us abreast of local news. They read the local newspaper. Somebody else read a national newspaper. Somebody read a book on... I'm just trying to think of solutions because, not that you were trying to do it, I was getting a little down, Gus. I was feeling a little bit, disappointed in myself. I get why you're saying it. I think that's the reality. We are in a pitiful position. I don't want to speak pitifulness on us, like we're just pitiful. I don't want to do that anymore because I am learning more about spirituality and, this power, PGQ for me, in the tongue, life and death. So I want to speak the opposite, and hopefully it'll come true, because we'll be able to produce justice somehow. But we are in a pitiful state currently. So I'm just trying to figure out a solution where if we team read that way, because that's how it happens in corporations anyway. These white people, they don't be reading, stuff that ain't relevant to their lives. They'll check in with somebody that, or check in with other people that know, okay, well, Bill knows that. I'm going to call Bill, and I'm being funny, but I'm being for real. So, I don't know. Maybe it could work for us. Maybe somebody got an adaptation to what I said. I'm willing to hear it. I do read, though. I love to read. I don't read fiction. It's just I'm having a hard time keeping up with current nonfiction. You understand? And I just want to, pay my respects to Dr. Maya Angelou. I'm sorry. From earth to the sky. I apologize. Long time ago, SNL did a skit where she was, she was being made fun of by a parody with David Allen Greer, who I like as an actor because I grew up watching In Living Color. Yeah, I shouldn't have. I was a kid. I wasn't supervised at the time. And he was playing her. And I thought it was funny because I thought they were just trying to make fun of how she enunciates and everything. But like you said, looking back, that was mad disrespectful. And I'll read my line. Hopefully you don't fall out with me, Gus. I'm just kidding. But that's a suggestion. I'm just really trying to figure out something. Thanks.
As the great Neely Fuller Jr. said, I don't like anybody here, so too late. Is it, just for a question, is it with the reading, much obliged for the honesty as well, they talked about that in the report, lots of people, even white people, saying that they don't have time and it's so much, family commitment. She's an attempted parent. I don't have children. She's an attempted parent, so that takes up a lot of time in and of itself and work and, blah, blah, blah. Lots of people say that. White people say that. Is it time, or is it not being aware of books that are, like you were talking about, you have specific things that you're interested in? Is it not being aware of new books that come out that are in those areas that you're interested in, or is it just finding the time, even if you did become aware of those books?
It's a little bit of both, because there's been so many things, like you said, family life, which some of you are aware of, that prohibited it. And then I'm also not aware fully because I'm in the current point where I've practiced a lot of Sankofa. I've bought books that I wish I'd have read in my 20s and beyond. The Dr. Amos Wilson's and Urugu and like the Iceman Inheritance. So I'm when I am reading and getting a chance to read something, I'm going back to such old information that I feel I missed out on. But then every now and then I'll be in the library because I'm there, because I'm part of the library system in a way, and they'll put out the new books. I'll grab a book. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to read this old book while I'm in the sauna, and I'm going to read this new book while I'm in the sauna, and I'll take turns because, like I said, I sit in there 30 minutes every time I go, and it's like 3 to 4 times a week. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She said a little bit of both in terms of time and then being aware of books. Now, I did say going to the university library because they have way more books than most local libraries. Most, not all, but generally speaking, they will have way more from all over the world and that sort of thing, as it should be. But that's one I would always say, like, if you can switch it up to go to different libraries, now that's time too, and depending on your location. Even community college, they'll have different types of books, different sources of books. That can be one to kind of switch it up so you're seeing different selections and different titles that you can pick from. Even if you go to a library where you can't check a book out per se, the technology in 2025, I would say most libraries, even college, university libraries, they have digital scanners where you could probably scan whatever book they have and take a free copy. I did that. I did not do that at the University of Washington. I just took digital copies straight, which they have that at a lot of the libraries too. So, I mean, if you go, you can just take a straight digital copy and skip the scan. And then a lot of times they will at least have a digital scanner so you can scan it and put it on your flash drive or whatever and boop, skedaddle, read it at your leisure that way. And then for the time, I would say just make it, I mean, certainly having offspring makes it a lot more challenging if you're in an attempted marriage type thing. Careers can be demanding. Lots of different things can, extract your time and energy. But I think just making that time, I know we had this conversation with Dr. Ruby Lathan, and it was the same thing. Folks not having time, talking about food and saying that I just eat out, order from McDonald's or eat Cheetos, really bad food because I just don't have time to cook or to go shopping or to even change. I've been eating bad food, not eating veggies and such for my entire life. So I also would have to take time to study, learn about this, and then relearn what is food, what do I want to eat, and I just don't have the time to put into all that. And Dr. Lathan said, well, until you make time, it's not going to change. And I'd say it might be the same with the reading. I think we could just make a little bit of time, and then she said it might take longer to read. That's okay. Even if just starting out, I'm just going to take 10 minutes. I'm going to take 10 minutes. I think even the busiest person, they can steal 10 minutes in a day to do a little bit of reading. Now, if it's really, really that big, because I mean, most people I know, they find 10 minutes or more to watch television. Just, I don't know too many people who don't sit down to watch TV for more than 10 minutes generally. That's what I'm saying. I think we could steal 10 minutes, and it might take a while. It's one of those things, if you haven't really been reading, especially if you're not reading like fluff, Waiting to Exhale, that type of a thing, Iceman Slim, it will work your brain computer, which is the same thing. If you haven't been to the gym, eating out, if you haven't been working out, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Just do 10 minutes every day. Make it an everyday thing. I just read 10 minutes. And then it might be able to increase after a while. You can read a little bit more, but I think just investing a little bit of time using our brain computer for something other than staring at a screen to watch movies and such, because people might be reading on a screen. Man, it is imperative. And we miss out on so much information. We are so uninformed. We are pitiful. It's not anything for us to put our head down. Fuller said the same thing. It's not anything for us to put our head down, but man, to be truthful, so we don't get on that bragging about black culture and all the rest of it. We are poorly informed about everything. Us doing some serious studying and reading would correct that just a little bit more than what we do. Would make a big difference, I think. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, you have commentary, proceed. Octavius in New York. I forgot to say about the clip with the OmniPass cards. I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder metaphor. I apologize, but man, we have free passes for children in Seattle. Now, that's not a new thing. They haven't had that forever, but I think it's been like 2 years now. If you are under 18, I guess you could be playing hooky when you're not going to school or whatever, but if you're under 18, you can ride public transportation anywhere in Puget Sound, I think, at least the greater Seattle area. That means you can take the bus, you can take the train, you can take the ferry, all of that for free to get yourself to, from school, or any other activities. Like that policy and obviously they don't have as many black children here in Seattle, but they instituted that policy because they were having lots of non-white children. That was their entry point for the system. Was, oh man, I don't have train fare to get to school. Oh man, I don't have bus fare to ride the bus. Oh man, and they locked me up. Dang, I'm only 15. I'm trying to get to school, man. So they started making it free. So now they've got that, what I think, draconian policy. Oh my God, in fact, you don't even have to have a card. All you have to do is get on the bus. If you're 15, 16, 17, whatever, get on the bus and whatever. They don't argue and, hey, Leroy, you don't look like you're 17, Leroy. Get back to, just get on the bus, go sit down, and or get on the train, go sit down, and that's that. Not in New York. You better not let your uncle use your Omni card. You better not. I don't know. Are you in New York City, Octavius?
Yes, I am.
Wow.
I still deal with that. I have to be honest, one of the things that it's because it was interesting you mentioned it, because literally my son just got his Omni card 2 weeks ago. So I didn't know that it was tracking to that extent, but that's interesting that it does. I have been keeping tabs on him from time to time, but for the most part, I kind of allow him leeway because he tells me, hey, after school I'm going to be with a friend and then I'm going to come home. So I kind of keep tabs on him already. But I just find it interesting they do that. But I'll tell you this, and this happened to me when I was young in New York. We went on a school trip to Columbia University. I thought it was an interesting trip. I never went to Columbia before. But on the way back, our teacher said, hey, you guys can go home. You don't have to, head back to the school, because by the time you head back, school's going to be closed. Doesn't make any sense. So me and a couple of other kids were about to get on the train. As soon as we were about to get on the train, the lady behind in the booth says to us, you kids can't go through. And we said, we have our train passes. And she said, we don't care if you have your train pass. You kids can't go through. We said, you're coming from a school trip. You don't have money. How are we going to go home? Well, you're going to have to figure it out. So, unbeknownst to me, I just looked around. And I was like, well, how am I going to get home to Brooklyn from all the way up in Harlem? So I hopped the turnstile, came downstairs, jumped on the train. 3 of my friends followed me. Literally, I think all of them did, actually. And the detective comes up and says, get off the train, you're coming with us. And they threw us in holding cells. And mind you, we're teenagers now. We're like 15 and all this other stuff. And they threw us in holding cells with, like, criminals. And it was ridiculous. And when we got back, when we were released, we got a fine. And then the school disputed it. They heard about it and everything that happened, and all the charges were supposedly dropped. My mother was absolutely fuming in regards to it, because she was under the impression, now my son's in the system. Which I think, once you're in it, you're in it. I don't believe there's deleting of records. So that was actually my experience with it. I did get a fine and locked up in regards to just hopping the turnstile to try to get home. So those Omni cards, I'm a little relieved that he doesn't have to do that. But the tracking situation is definitely problematic. And I wanted to say this in regards to a recent trip I did take to Brooklyn Public Library. There is a an event there they had for James Baldwin. It was more like, images and pictures of him in Turkey when he left. And this was shortly after many of his friends were assassinated, murdered. That goes from Medgar Evers to Martin Luther and Malcolm, of course. And they stated that he was so depressed that he tried to kill himself, and then he left for Turkey in that process to kind of gather himself. So they had an exhibit there discussing some of those things and discussing some of the points, but they didn't really give a lot of, again, whenever white people do these things, they never really give a lot of context. They leave it up to you. And if you don't actually know the history of why he went to Turkey, you're just going to figure he just went there just to write and just to experiment with his craft with playwrights and theater. But it was way deeper than that. And the other question I had also with James Baldwin, I noticed that they really liked, because there's also another exhibit in the Schomburg Center up in Harlem. And I'm like, why are they always promoting James Baldwin? And I realized, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think it's partially because of because of his sexuality, and then also he was dating white men, if I'm correct. And I think not only that, but he was under, I forgot what publisher. I have to look this up again. But the publisher, or his so-called handler, as they say, was right and was accepting of him. And I think when, if I'm correct, when things changed, when he came back from Turkey, that's when his whole perspective kind of shifted a little bit more, quote-unquote, militant, as they say. But that's just a couple of things I wanted to share there. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll move my line. Thank you.
That is interesting in terms of white people's fascination with James Baldwin, in terms of there's so many black people who have written about, attempted to counter racism, white supremacy. Neely Fuller Jr. They don't seem as fascinated and in love with author and writer Mr. Fuller the same way that they are about James Baldwin. Probably lots of reasons to explain that. And in fact, James Baldwin will be popping up in Dr. Maya Angelou's memoir, A Song Flung Up to Heaven. We already had Mr. Malcolm X. Dr. King and James Baldwin will feature heavily. It's not even that large of a book, so pretty soon they will feature prominently. We can even think about that when we get to those portions of the book. Why are white people, Malcolm X mused on that, why are white people so enthralled about James Baldwin? To, I think Irie's point, Dr. Maya Angelou, I think she said she saw those skits of black males portraying Maya Angelou and just thought they were poking fun at her kind of unique diction and style of speech, and not processing the, wait a minute, why do they have a dude, and then why do they have all of these different black dudes playing Dr. Maya Angelou over and over and over for years? That's on, like, what is up with that? We talked about that on the book club. Like, why are they doing this? And I think a lot of us, myself included, just recently became aware of this and started thinking about it. So we'll have to think on it some more. And we didn't really find a whole lot of material analyzing what's happening behind this online. Then just pairing that with Michelle Obama is a man, according to white people, Elon Musk's dad. What's going on there? Something to think about. Neely Fuller Jr. But something to think about. That is a little, I don't know if he said that they would be calling females males. That is a little different than having a male dress up as a female, but contempt for gender, got it. Let's see. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate.
Hello.
Greetings, our caller in Georgia.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having the best evening they can have. Thank you for taking my call. The reading, that's something, I think even people that read a lot believe they don't read enough. So that's something that we all have to do, definitely myself included. I know sometimes, because especially now the job I have, I don't know if I get just tired of thinking. You know, when you read, you do have to think critically. And I just have to learn to get over that, to continue thinking when I'm not working, because I have to read things to people that don't want to read. And I go, well, I guess I have job security, because these people do not want to read to find the answers to these questions. But, excuse me, that's something I have to work on. But to connect that to the passes in New York, I also grew up, I know I'm in Virginia, but I think I stayed from time to time. I was born and raised in New York City, grew up there with the high school, first 18 years there and everything. And my school, and I did get I got what was called the combination pass, because some people got, there are various levels, half year, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But I got the combination surface and rail pass, so I could take the bus or the train, 5 days a week within a certain amount of time. They could cut off at 8 p.m. That could pretty much go almost everywhere in the city. So I think I heard it say they only got four swipes a day, which for someone who did not live, like my high school was, I guess, what was it, Upper East Side. And sometimes people had to take the train and the bus to get to that school. There's 2 swipes going, 2 swipes going home. You couldn't go anywhere else. How are you going to go to the library to get a book out? Not every school has a great lab, access to e-books and all that in the schools. I know that's supposed to be improving, I guess, because of COVID, but they don't. I don't know, over my high school, I went from 7th to 12th grade, how many times I went to the library to get a book, to do projects over and over. And I was, like I said, I went to high school. My high school was on 94th Street. I went to the library on 42nd Street, not the library with the lions that people see all the time in movies, but there's one across the street from that. That was kind of the main, everybody could go to the library. And because they had the most books, so I go all over. And, I went there all the time to get books and put out articles and whatever, to do projects and papers and things like that. I mean, that is ridiculous. I know the previous quote, he talked about getting caught up in the system because you jumping the turnstile, but you can't even do any work. That is ridiculous. And when I was in high school, my high school was affiliated with Hunter College. In 8th grade, we all had swimming, so I had to take the train to go swim. So, swimming. Great. Swim class, go to school, that's 2. Maybe I can go to the library, maybe, and then go home. Forget friends. If your friend wants around the corner, good luck to you. I think that is atrocious and ridiculous. I understand that New York City needs money. I did not grow up that way. I go wherever I want to go, think from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 5 days a week. Some stations, they might look funny, and they didn't, because they're like, there's no library around here, there's no school around here. And I was just arguing with the people. I'm like, look, I'm going. I didn't jump into her. So I was like, look, how am I supposed to get home? And maybe because I was a female, they were, more inclined to help me make sure I got home or whatever. But that is atrocious. Like I said, it's not just the 4. I guess my thing was the 4 swipes, and that get access to so many things in New York City. Going to the library, going to the museum. There's so many things that kids need access to in the city for their education. It's not, and non-white children, black children especially. You can't go anywhere with 4. You can barely go anywhere with 4 stripes. And don't try to have a little job. Oh my God, that is horrible. And I don't know, I guess people just don't care, greedy about the money. I think, like we say all the time, white people do not care about children, because that is atrocious to me. and that does affect the education and literacy. All the other clips are important. I guess I'm just really stuck on that right now as it relates to children. And so that's what I have to say right now. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the evening, everyone.
Take good care. She still sounds a little not well. Drink lots of water. Get those fluids up. Get that tea. I had tea today. Drink some tea. Get lots of rest. Take good care of yourself. No, it's still wintertime. Might be chilly down there. That is a great point. Somebody does say that white people do not care about children. Excellent point with those bus passes, because that's so draconian, unless she emphasized that you only get those 4 swipes for a child, to be able to get to school and then back home. And that is, really important in terms of you are in New York City. You have access to so much, all of the museums and events and things that, are happening in New York City all of the time, and you can't access any of that. Like she said, just go to the, library or what have you. Nap, 2 swipes, 2 swipes, that 2 swipes. Like, dang. Then I'm just comparing that. Seattle, also big city, certainly not the size of New York City, but still big city. There's lots to do throughout the Puget Sound area, and the whole town is your oyster. If you are under 18, you don't have to fill out any paperwork. You don't have to qualify your parents, anything like that. You're under 18, get on the train, get on the bus, get on the ferry, whatever. And I think you could go all the way to Tacoma from here. It wouldn't even like you just have to be stuck in Seattle per se. You could really get out and explore, go to the library and all kinds of constructive things, take advantage of everything that the city has to offer. That is not what they want for black children, non-white children in the greater New York area. Like that. 2 swipes. You get 2 going and 2 back. That's it. We got detectives. We'll be waiting for you. Exactly as they intended. And that's something that's so dang, you can't let children take public transportation for free, for real. Come on. Y'all got money for everything else you can waste on all kinds of other nonsense, but you can't let children get to school. I mean, hey, you're going to fuss at us for truancy, right? You put parents in prison for truancy if they don't get their children to school. So me taking the train, or even as she said, if I got after school activity, maybe, I want to do some swimming. I saw old Mike Phelps and I got into that. Black people don't swim. You can't even swim. Get out of here. 2 swipes. Man. Anyway, number 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. That's even important too. She said some folks, it might not even be that you are going to swim lessons or going to the Met Museum or anything else. It's just that I live a little bit further away from the school, so I might need more than 2 swipes to actually get to school, more than 2 swipes to get home from school. That. 2 swipes. man, but system of when they made, I forgot when the Rona kicked off here in Seattle in spring of 2020, they made public transportation free for 7 months, 8 months. It might even been longer than that, but it was almost for the entire 2020 calendar year. It was just free. Forget it. 'Cause this is one of the places where they shut down for the first 2 or 3 months anyway. So it was stay home, sit. Most of the places are closed and masked up and all of that. And then I don't even remember what the rationale was for why public transportation. Oh, it was so no contact. That was what it was. It was to protect the operators so that you wouldn't have any sort of contact with it. Even still, though, that doesn't make sense for the subway because the subway was free too. I don't know what the rationale was for the train, but the train was free too. All of public transportation was free for a very long time in Seattle because of COVID-19. That was another one where I pointed to where white people could do all kinds of things. They could say, hey, Negroes, you don't pay anything for public transportation. We got years of racism and white supremacy. That's the least we can do. You can get a raggedy bus or train ride on us, you know, our bad. You even call that your reparations pass and make racist jokes about it. At least for the children, right? Nah, get 2 swipes. Let's see. Retired firefighter in Florida. Jeff Commentary should be with us.
Greetings, everyone. My first report would be one of my PSAs. It was a very tragic event that took place about a week ago, week and a half ago, actually. About 2 miles south of me, whereas 4 children were killed along with their grandmother. The event, they were in vehicles, in a vehicle. They were going to quote unquote celebrate a birthday of one of the deceased children by going to the movies. There were 8 people in the vehicle. The vehicle was hit from behind by a 27-year-old who was under the focus of alcohol, going, the report says 99 miles an hour. The Bible will say 100 miles an hour. No braking at all, slammed into the back of this vehicle and killed 4 children and a grandmother. I would identify that particular event as a crime and some stage of murder from that standpoint. Just my opinion. It probably is officially, but I'm not an attorney or anything like that or a legal expert. One thing that I would caution anybody on, because I looked up the type of vehicle that they were driving in, the victims were driving in, and because the report stated that it was 8 people in that vehicle of children and an adult, and the capacity of that vehicle was only to be 5 people. And it was 8 people actually in the vehicle. So although what took place, it probably wouldn't have been prevented by that many people, but it probably complicated it more by having that many people. So I would warn anybody to do not have the overage of capacity that the vehicle that you're in is supposed to have. Also, additional reports that I have, my favorite law enforcement officer, Mr. Gregory Tony, it came on the news a couple of days ago to take full responsibility. There was a very heinous criminal activity that took place just north of me in Broward County, which is the county that's next to me. And all of the victims and the perpetrator were white people. But it's also, but the subject matter is pertinent to people that's on the line right now. Domestic violence. The husband, for some reason, got his gun and chased the wife. She went knocking on doors to try to gain some sort of safety, and she was let in by a neighbor across the street. The husband entered into the house and killed her and the person that let her in. Also, before that, he killed his wife's father. The child was all along with him, and from that standpoint, but the reason why Mr. Tony came into the news is because, of course, he's the director of that law enforcement department, and they were getting criticized because she had a restraining order. She had a restraining order. She actually had it twice with this person, and in turn, law enforcement was in close proximity to this crime, and they are investigating, and they're bringing up evidence on the news itself, in the news itself, that they were describing on what was going on, but they weren't acting on it from that standpoint. So therefore, black male victim of racism, white supremacy, Gregory Tony, the head of the department, is taking full responsibility, and at the same time, he has suspended about 8 of his fellow employees in turn for what he felt was not acting in a way that they were supposed to act. Last but not least, we talk about the people activity of education, and we also talk about teaching. And one thing I've noticed, just in this school year, which is about a little bit over halfway, is that there, almost every time that I either look at the news or read a newspaper, there is at least one case of a non-white black person getting arrested for sexual relations with a child. At least once during the week, or once during the week, there's a report on it. And so I would caution anybody that is a teacher, and I tell this to my own offspring because he's a teacher. He's subbing right now. Never find yourself in a room with a child, male or female, actually. And to anybody, if you got in mind the idea of you getting some sort of sexual emotional interest in a child, then you don't need to be in that environment in the first place. But anyway, just some observations that I've had over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And that's my report. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. That would definitely be something to talk to your offspring about. If he says he's seeing this in the local, hey, check in the news. I love it. Spoken like Dr. Welsing, Dr. Cambon, Mr. Fuller. Check the local news. Beautiful. He said, this is not a one-off thing. We can put Diddy to the side, put R. Kelly to the side. This is all the time. Sexual activity with a child. Dare I say, white people don't care about children, and being in that environment, hey, we don't care either. We just throw away children. That is encouraged in this system, as is really raping children. That is kind of encouraged in this system. Talk to your children about all of this if you want to protect them to the degree that you can, the types of environments that you are in, being mindful, trying to be present if you can. But hey, this is the world in which we live. System of white supremacy. Children are not valued, especially if they are not white. Got that? What was one of the book titles? The Violence of Love. Family. Oh, it's race. How can I leave out race, family, and adoption in the United States? Racism, white supremacy, and throw away children. That's part of it right there. See, if you adopt them, that's easy. You can do all the molesting and things you want because you got them behind closed doors, as they say. Jerry Sandusky said that's what to do. Go to the foster homes and such. That's what to do. Anywho, one of our UK listeners, Andrew, dialed in or wrote in. I emailed him to remind him of his brilliant observation that it is much easier to discuss the global system of white supremacy racism with Donald Trump as president. Now, he said this during the Trumpster's first term. I emailed him like 30 days into term number 2 to say, wow, totally accurate in my view. Way more non-white people discussing white supremacy racism on a global scale. It seems way more willing to discuss racism. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're accurate, but way more willing to discuss this here topic as a problem. And the primary problem that we need to be talking about is racism, white supremacy. Not the total problem solved, but a little bit of it. Certainly, in my view, way different than when President Obama was president in the White House, and then even when Joe Biden was in the White House, in my view. He wrote back and he said, good to hear, still listen time to time, blah, 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 blah. In my opinion, Trump, like all white people, are sadly, at the very least, racist suspects. If this were not the case, the whole world, including white people, would be a lot happier. The question I have been most concerned with is how can non-whites, in particularly those of African descent with my DNA and or the darkest skin, stop ourselves from being controlled by white people worldwide? Now, I'll pause right there. In my view, most of the non-white people in the known universe do not have that as their goal, to stop ourselves from being controlled by white people worldwide. In fact, I hardly know anyone that's like even in their top 10 of things that they are trying to accomplish. We are going to stop white people from controlling all of our areas of people activity worldwide. We are going to figure out a method to do that. Like, I do not, in terms of like people that I'm around, black people that I'm around, like, wow. I mean, if we want to say that's synonymous with replace white supremacy with justice, like I said, it's Black History Month. You all can have been, presumably, if you're in the U.S., you could have been going and hearing seminars and all that stuff and hearing black people talk. I have. I've heard black people say black culture and what are black people in this part of the world. I'm talking about the black Americans, the authentic black people, not the tethers. What are we about? I have not heard one person say replacing white supremacy with justice. Not one. I have not heard one person say we are about stopping ourselves from being controlled by white people worldwide. Not one. So until that changes, it will just be more of the same. You know, in fact, most of us, what I say, not all white people are racist. And those who are racist are ignorant. I would say that's not every single one of us, but wow, that is vast quantities of non-white people throughout the known universe. Dare I say the majority of non-white people throughout the known universe, that is how they think. That being the case, like, oh man, until that changes and more non-white people grasp, we're not going to be able to solve any of these problems until we replace white supremacy with justice. And in fact, we're probably going to have to stop pussyfooting and say it explicitly. replace white supremacy with justice. He said, stop ourselves from being controlled by white people worldwide. That we do a lot of pussyfooting. I said race and all that, and that's encouraged by white people because they lie all the time. But until that changes and you start having more non-white people recognize, hey, we're victims of white supremacy, and that's what we're going to have to address directly, things will continue. It's talking about a lot with finance. I mean, at the end of the day, the people who control all of the finance are classified as white. He even uses the term so-called Africa and the global South. Again, I say that one of white people's time. They cause all that confusion, so-called global North, so-called global South. What are we even talking about? You mean the places where non-white people are? Got it. You mean non-white people, victims of white supremacy? Got it. That's what I said. I think getting better with terms, that's another one. And I think if we did more reading, I think all of this is connected. All of this is connected. We don't do very much reading and studying, and then we're confused about white supremacy, racism. So it just all works together. I think if we had a better understanding of white supremacy, racism, and we did more studying, we could apply that understanding, come up with more concepts, better techniques of trying to address this problem. And then I think if we also, the people that do read, I don't think they have an accurate understanding of racism, white supremacy. It's like what Dr. Welsing said. They end up saying, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, that type of a thing. The more educated they become, the more ignorant they become. That sort of thing. It's pitiful, man. That's what it is. Something to put your head. I mean, man, our situation is worthy of head hanging. Absolutely. Ralph Yarl, yes. Being snatched up for trying to go to school on the train, isn't that pitiful? Yes. Yeah, he said they put him, I'm a teen. I got a backpack and a geometry book. I'm in prison with rapists, looters. Wasn't that Khalif Browder? I don't think he was going to school. They said he stole a backpack, but still. What to expect in the system of white supremacy? Again, I can't say enough. Hey, if you're going to produce a child that's going to be classified as black, you have to talk to them about all of this in advance. And again, some of this, it shouldn't be a lot of confusion. Like, what do I tell my child about racism? I keep saying, tell them what them white folks do to you on your job. That's one. Two, tell them what those white women teachers did to you in school. Tell them about that time the white folks cuffed you, slammed you up, and threw you in the cell with rapists, looters, because you were trying to get to school. And it was a problem. That's what to do right there. Just talk about that, and then you can go tell them about Sade Robinson and all the rest of it, why you won't let them have a smartphone, all that. That is the job. And I can empathize with folks who say, man, that's tough. You got to be doing all that reading and thinking and talking about all that icky stuff with your children, and that's not cool. That's not pleasant. I don't like that. Ugh. I agree. That is the planet that we live on. So we can either get busy, get to doing the work that needs to be done, and particularly solving this problem, or, be content with more of the same, that being, black people that can't read. Heard about that in the book club yesterday. Black people being killed unjustly. A black fella in New York being killed. Black children being thrown in prison with Khalif Browder. You can just, have 3, 4, 20 more generations of that and get to 3025 and still be playing Neely Fuller Jr. audio because it's relevant. You want to talk about pitiful? Any hoodles. I will confirm and see, make sure we're going to be here Monday evening. Normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then book club, reversal book club now on Fridays, neutralizing workplace racism on Thursdays, so people won't be confused. with that sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. You can just replay retired firefighter in Florida's PSA. Certainly you don't want to overload the vehicles if you have little people in the car. Get a minivan or what have you if you have lots of little folks. But the big one, sobriety would be best. I don't know that there's ever an optimal time to be driving 100 miles an hour in a vehicle, shout to NWA, but certainly if you have had 3 or 8 shots of tequila, that is not the time to be driving 99 miles an hour or to even be at the steering wheel. Hey, I will have to say again, because it's Black History Month, this isn't everybody, but given what we have read for the past 2 months from Dr. Maya Angelou, hey, it's Saturday night. I'm black and I'm dangerous. Often I'm dangerous because I'm gonna get me some stuff tonight. And that is Negro culture, not reading. We will make time to get me some stuff. We will make time to act a fool, especially on a Saturday night. We will not make time to read. That is not all of us. But Dr. Welsing did say, man, we will get that dance step. Man, how many black people you know they made 12 minutes to watch Kendrick Lamar insult Drake at the Super Bowl? Maybe even made time to watch 4 hours of the whole game and the exciting Whites triumph. I just said 10 minutes to read per day. Just 10 minutes. 10 minutes stretched out over a week. That's not even the whole Super Bowl. We don't have that sort of culture, though, reading in a serious, disciplined commitment to counter racism. We, for Black History Month, got a I'm gonna get me some stuff tonight culture. As such, you should wear a seatbelt. Creator, help me maximize my time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Help me to stop wasting non-white people's time and energy, including my own, often by watching TV. Minimize contact. Minimize conflict. Stop name-calling black people. Stop being discourteous to black people. Stop gossiping. Stop producing throwaway offspring for white people to adopt or lock up with rapists. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.